conquer yet another
or,
chess
ATP
domain.
for tennis.
On
We are
the
really
other,
engaging the
his
fans.
greatest challenger,
Entertainment,
Fabiano
pure,
Caruana.
still
No one
the
ever came
sports on the
closer
highest level
to knocking
possible,
Carlsen
but
off
we're
his
gonna
world
present it in the
championship
most
perch.
exciting way.
This
From
is the
very
premiere
first
of the
move, they
Freestyle
will
Chess
both have to
Summit in
adapt to new
Singapore.
patterns and
87.
unfamiliar,
The first of two
unforgiving
evening
terrain.
games takes place on board
Freestyle
an
is the
exclusive
future of
yacht in the
chess.
Singapore marina.
Come and join
Freestyle
us on
Chess
this
with classic
unpredictable
thinking
journey.
time. A rousing and electrifying game between Magnus Carlsen and Fabiano Caruana, which the world #1 ultimately wins.
I didn't immediately feel that this was a position where you could gain a big initiative from the opening. That's why.
Welcome to the Freeport, everybody. High security storage vault gallery for some of the most priceless art in the world. And tonight, it is the location for the event of the year so far, the event that continues to turn the chess world upside down. It's the 2025 Freestyle Grand Chess Tour that is launched. We have Magnus Carlsen versus Fabiano Caruana. But before we get to the chess, we have our founders once again, Jan Henrik and Holly Buettner. I think you might have outdone yourselves a little bit here. Holly, was this the vision when you mentioned all four elements?
This was part of the vision, yes, and we are just so happy to Le Freeport to have us have this amazing venue. They were so good with cooperation, and we are just so happy to be here in this amazing location. We're actually standing inside a piece of art itself. So this is actually imported from the MoMA in New York, and now we are playing inside this beautiful piece. So I can't express how excited I am. And going back to you, thank you all for the amazing teamwork. We are super excited for the finale of our event here.
We're excited. This is a secure facility because of all the priceless stuff going down here. But Freestyle Chess has been anything but secure in all the right ways. Is this the creative vision you thought of when this all started last year in Germany?
I mean, it escalates by the minute, as you see with us. You know, it's just like when we plan something, we say, okay, let's do it this way, and then we have an idea to optimize it, and even more crazy, and so we end up with this situation where, as Holly said, we even didn't realize that if anybody has been to the Modern Museum of Art of New York, he has been in this thing, and this has just the transport cost, I have heard, just to put it here was $8 million just to put this piece of art here. And so talking about values, like billions and billions and billions of value here. We just saw
they can afford it because there's a lot of value right here.
Yeah,
just this gold chess table.
50 million is the value of this. This is one 12.5 kilo bar, which is about $1.4 million, and then one of those small ones is $100,000. So it's crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
This is crazy in all the right ways. This is amazing. And it's time for us to pick our next crazy position.
Yes,
if you two will once again help us and do the honors, let's head over. We see our two players eagerly, maybe anxiously awaiting which position it will be for their next freestyle battle. Remember, we've had 3 positions so far, position number 12, position number 619, and position number 87. So it will not be one of those. But Holly, when you are ready,
We'll do a countdown here again.
let's do it again. All right, everybody in the building. We got a live crowd here on my count. Ready? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, we lost a few, but that's just all part of the show.
Some escaped, and we're going to go deep, and we're going to go to this one. It is number 180. 180.
Position 180 has been drawn. That means our arbiter is officially getting that position ready. Jan Henrik's going to put it right here. Remember, there's a 5th spot here just in case we go to Armageddon tonight. So for all the fans watching live from all over the world, we got a lot of chess ahead, and the party's just getting started. So as we see over here, our arbiter is getting the position set up, and then our players are going to head to their respective preparation boards. While they do that, I'm going to throw it into the commentary booth here from Maurice and Tanya to give us their first impressions of position 180.
It is a dream to play this tournament.
This was absolutely amazing.
The organization was really great.
The chess highlight of the year, the Freestyle Chess Summit in Singapore. Magnus Carlsen versus Fabiano Caruana, an epic showdown of chess giants. The evening before the summit, there was already a spectacular exhibition fight in the head-in-hand format. Above the rooftops of Singapore at the Swiss Hotel de Stamford. Magnus Carlsen in the team with Tanya Sachev against Fabiano Caruana and Maurice Ashley, with a win for Sachev and Magnus Carlsen.
It's been a great event, and I'm looking forward to enjoying not only playing but also socializing. It's going to be fantastic. We're going to have 5 amazing tournaments with the best players in the world in the format that I want to play. So cannot get much better than that.
An impressive start to the Freestyle Chess Summit in Singapore.
I like the atmosphere. I'm really looking forward to the tour very much. I think it'll be exciting, it'll be very new, and the organization is top level. I'm really looking forward to all the tournaments, and I hope that I'll do well.
1,000 times better than I was imagining and dreaming. It's amazing, it's really fantastic, and it's like, it's a dream. It's amazing.
Freestyle Chess, more creativity, more excitement, more chess like you've never seen before.
And the final game between Fabiano Caruana and Magnus Carlsen is about to begin. It is position 180, and it's Fabiano. He's on our screen. He needs to pull a 180 from everything that happened in round one between these two players. It's a must-win to take it to Armageddon. Maurice, what does Fabi do today to get by?
First of all, he's got to settle himself down because the game he had yesterday was such a challenge for him. Right away, right out the opening, he was in trouble. He had to start mixing things up. He was able to do so and had real chances in that game, but he didn't make the most of it and ended up being smashed. I mean, really destroyed by the very end. So has he gotten his mindset right? Has he gotten himself together? I think he's a person who can bounce back, but Magnus is so Joe cool. Magnus is a great front runner, and I think that's going to be a serious challenge, Tanya, for Fabi to come back from, is overcoming a confident Magnus Carlsen.
And he never got going in round one, but he's got to leave that behind. And what a beautiful setting it is. We're expecting some beautiful chess. We've got a beautiful position in front of us right now. This is where the players will start, and they're discussing it. We will try to get their audio in as well. We see Sagar on our screen. I'm looking at the position as well. Marie, so many things stand out. The first thing that we always look at are unprotected, undefended pawns in the position. I do not spot any one of them, so at least no big glaring weakness. But once again, we've got the queens on the corner of the board.
Yes, and you're correct in saying that there are no undefended pawns, but it's funny that in this position, the f2/f7 pawn is protected by the king alone. And we know that from our position 518, that's often there's a checkmate on that square, but how are you going to get two pieces to aim at that very quickly? Not so easily. So f2 and f7 are really not that sensitive at the moment. The kings are providing sufficient protection. So there are no simple targets. The biggest problem to me at the moment seems to be the knight on a1, but that one can go to b3, pawn c4 and d4. If you push the pawns in the center of the board, that really makes it easy for the pieces to come out. The only problem then would be the queen, but after g3, it will be able to come out. And by the way, very funny moment. Castles on move 1 is possible. You could just castle on the right side. So this looks pretty fluid at the moment. The biggest problem for Fabi is it may be too easy for black to develop pieces here with no worries anywhere like he had yesterday, where a pawn was hanging on a7 after move 1. I think this is a challenging position for white to get any advantage.
Well, it's also the good news is that it's a challenging format for white to shut down, for black to shut down the game in any way or really know the path to that equality. Being freestyle chess for Fabi, he has to try to get the initiative early on. And now get this, the two of them have played against each other, freestyle chess, Fisher Random, a bunch of times. They've played position 7-4-4, 3-5-7, 6-7, 6-4-2, 2-9-9, 3-3-6, 9-4-9, 9-0, that's a lot of chess. And yesterday, it was position number 87. So this is something that's fresh for the two of them. They've got a couple of minutes before we start. We're getting live scenes from the playing arena. By the way, we're in Singapore, Freeport. I've never seen anything like this. Maurice and I are inside a vault right now, calling the action. Danny will be joining us. What on earth is going on?
I got to say, I've played in crazy places. I've also done commentary in crazy places. Maybe the one that jumps to mind is the World Trade Center. I did commentary for the 1995 match with Anand and Kasparov, and I did that in the building that no longer exists. That was destroyed in 9/11. So that was quite a location to do commentary from. This one really takes the cake. A vault with millions and millions of dollars where you could just kind of reach out, maybe sneak one. I didn't say that, folks. I don't want to get arrested in this place. The security is super tight, but it's extraordinary. I mean, we did the yacht yesterday, and now we're upping it with a vault. It's just incredible. And the players, they don't even care about it. Remember yesterday we talked to Magnus and said, what do you think about playing on a yacht? He said, once the game starts, my mind is on chess.
I mean, right there are a bunch of gold bars lying worth millions of dollars.
44 million, I hear.
$44 million. I don't even know how many zeros that is, Maurice. And then there's priceless art all around. And we've got the two best chess players on the planet. We see it's a Fabi versus Fabi right now as he's going through the first moves that come to his mind. And the one advice that I got from Peter Lecker while I was commentating with him at Weissenhaus earlier this year, and there we've got Magnus on the screen, by the way, doing the same. Headphones are on, so the players cannot hear us. We're very close to them. The one piece of advice is that if the queens are in the corner, try to activate them as quickly as possible, which in this case would be moving the H pawn first, moving the G pawn first. Right now, Magnus is trying to preempt. How will white start? What is the possibilities? And what is the most probable first move for white in this position?
Magnus deep in thought there, as we see on the screen, and he knows he just needs to get a balanced position where he can flow. Magnus in flow is simply somebody you don't want to face off against, because he's a systems thinker. Is Magnus. A lot of people may have great moves, they have great ideas, maybe even to calculate very deeply, and he admits there are calculators who are better than he is. I would say even Fabi is a better calculator, just crunching numbers, than Magnus. But Magnus is a systems thinker. He sees what needs to be done, and his intuition and his sense of harmony just comes out of his fingertips. And once he's in that state of flow, he starts to hustle. You're done. He's just going to make move after move. We saw him yesterday with that final G5 gangster move, letting Fabi think he had have an attack, and it didn't work out. So we'll see if Fabi can find something to break that flow, to break that confidence, and maybe take this to an Armageddon.
It's really fascinating. The player playing white here right now, Fabi, I think he's looking at the bishop pawn moving forward. And very often when you're thinking about what your opponent will be responding to that with after 1c4, it's the symmetry in the position. So Fabi is thinking if he starts with this move, Magnus will return the favor with 1c5. And the whole advantage for white very often in freestyle chess is to try to break that symmetry, to make sure that you're able to do that before black consolidates and develops pieces. And that's usually with a break. Right now, Fabi is thinking, can he get that done if Magnus follows and plays copycat chess?
You're right. And that first break, as you just correctly mentioned, is really the essence of the opening in chess. Yes, you want to develop your pieces. Yes, you want to get your king to safety. But your rooks are going to need a future at some point, and folks like to know in advance. You look at the openings like the Queen's Gambit, for example, very famous classic opening. There's a reason why d4, d5, c4 is the next move, because it opens up the c file potentially for a rook, and it challenges the center. And the person who can do that first will have the initiative. So Fabi is looking at that, and we see that the rook is sitting on the d1 square. So if you play that way, white can get in that d4 break very quickly against the c5 move. As you mentioned, we don't have it on screen. We'll get into it a bit more deeply when we actually have the position on screen. But that's what you have to think about. Who gets the break first? Because the person with the break first opens up the game, and their pieces can just flow right behind that. And then in this case, black would have to figure out, well, what am I going to do to make sure that I'm not going to get steamrolled? So Fabi's looking at that. Magnus is certainly looking at that. How do I follow the pawn moves? Do I maintain the symmetry like you said with c4, c5? Do I break the symmetry right away and get dynamic? I only need a draw, he's thinking, right? I mean, does he want to go 2-0? We know how he feels about winning every single game. He might be thinking, let me just beat this guy up real bad and get his brain twisted all kinds of ways so he never has any confidence against me.
And the pressure's got to be on Fabi, right? Because as world number 2, as someone who's challenged Magnus Carlsen for the world championship title, you don't want to go down easy. You don't want that 2-0 score line. You want this to go down to the wire. So it's not an easy situation to deal with, but Fabi starts with the white pieces and $100,000 on the line over the next 1 hour. The winner walks away with 60, while the loser with 40,000. So there's money on the line, and Magnus Carlsen looks like he's done the analysis he needs to do. And I think we're going to head over to Danny, who will now get the insights from the players.
Yeah, can't we? Yeah. Back outside to the main playing hall in this vault. The players have had time to review the positions, caught up with Fabiano a little bit. We're going to talk about that once I switch into the commentary booth and give you the behind-the-scene thoughts he had about his preparation. But as we can see over here, the arbiter is already addressing the players and making sure that everything's okay, from the lighting to the temperature. One of the things about this vault high security cement metal buildings is the sound carries pretty strongly here. So the players tonight will be required to wear headphones for fair play purposes to ensure that they can't hear anything from the commentary booth. Our arbiter is explaining that to them right now. The spectators will stay out here, not entering in and out of the commentary building so that we don't have any sound leaking out, as if Maurice, Tanya, and I have any advice that's worth anything to these guys. But either way, the players will be wearing headphones, white and black per the color that they're playing, because that's sexy. That's how we do it at Freestyle, and that makes sense. All right, as the players get their final rules, I'm going to head into the commentary building, and we're going to get this party started, so don't go anywhere. We've got our first moves here in the second game of the Freestyle Chess match between Fabiano Caruana and Magnus Carlsen coming right up.
And we've got action. We've got liftoff. First moves are on the board. And I've got Danny Wrench here with me. Danny, you were just outside. Crazy scenes going on and a crazy position as well. What's the mood like first?
The mood out there was tense. There's actually a pretty good-sized live crowd out there. You just couldn't really hear them. Everyone was being really quiet and on the wall that never got on camera, I don't think. But the players were dialed in. And unlike last night, where Magnus was making a lot of moves on the board, he was actually being stoic and not pushing a lot of pieces, maybe worried Fabi could peer across the room. But we've already got action, and it's funny because I talked to Fabi while you and Maurice were breaking it down and got his thoughts on the position. And he started with the move he said he wanted to. He thought c4 was a really crucial idea to open up the bishop on b1. Talked about how that makes black at some point want to play g6, and then maybe that'll make the dark squares weak. But what's interesting is Fabi thought a key idea for white at some point would be to rush his h-pawn and try to create an attack. And before we even went live here, Magnus already has played the move h5 as if he anticipated this, and the computer likes black already.
And that's move 3, you know, they say in standard chess, Maurice, when in doubt, push the h-pawn. And we see the eval bar already saying that Magnus Carlsen is out of the opening in 3 moves with a bit of an advantage. You got to break that down for us. What's going on? Why does our Silicon friend like black so much right now?
Well, you don't even have to go to our Silicon friend to understand that in the opening, one of the things that you want to do is pressure the center, get open lines for your pieces, and maintaining that tension. My old coach, Greg Cardano, taught me that principle of maintain the tension if you can. Fabiano knows this quite well, but surprisingly, in this position, he played this move c5. c5 shuts down the tension. No potential for trading, no potential for opening any files. And when you shut it down on this side, you say to black, I'm not going to pressure your center anymore. I'm just taking space. But in this kind of space, particularly in this part of the board, that's significant. It looks as though it isn't. And I'm surprised then by why Fabi played it. Magnus is like, whatever, I'm going to play h5, get some freedom of movement for my queen, and also prevent any of these kind of excursions this way. And I'll have initiative as well. Notice how the bishops for black are perfectly poised along these diagonals as well. So I'm not feeling this position because I'm confused by c5. It's the kind of principle that I learned a long time ago is not that you want to adhere to. Keep the tension in the middle and pressure the possibilities there. Looks like Fabi might have slipped, but as early as move 3, guys, that just sounds extremely weird.
Yeah, it's strange, and it's also, I guess, a little bit just, it is what freestyle is, right, Tanya? I mean, these guys don't have preparation. They're not recalling even, let alone opening theory. They're not even really calling patterns that they know in the opening, right? And in the position that Maurice had up, it's interesting because the best approach for white was not to play c5, as Maurice said. It was actually to take on d5 and keep the position open. And then the computer liked the move after c takes d5, c takes d5, g4. And I just had to show this, Maurice, just to say, like, who's playing that idea?
Nobody.
Like, who's playing this according to the computer? I don't understand it. I mean, what was the... And then maybe it changes its mind with a little bit of thought.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what G4 is about, and it looks completely random. So I would think G4 is not a great move here. It seems to make more sense to start thinking about your pieces. Someday we would develop a piece. Although this engine is giving moves like A4, H4 makes more sense. What about our stock and trade knight of 3? Can we get some pieces into the game, please, at some point? That would make simple sense, even though the problem here is the symmetry. You've got to remember, white has to win. Fabi has to win this game. If Fabi doesn't win, the match is over. It's done. If he's going to take it to Armageddon, he has to win. And if you have too much symmetry, even with this trade that the engine is saying, I'm wondering, well, where does white get the advantage? You're trying to develop some pieces. It wouldn't work out.
Yeah.
Danny, this h-pawn moving forward by both sides, you know, you were talking about patterns. This looks like it came out of a Slav opening in standard chess, you know, where you push the D pawn, you push the C pawn, but no exchange Slav, and suddenly very Alpha Zero-esque chess. And Fabi is saying that h-pawn, it stops on h5. I'm not letting it move ahead, but that does weaken a few squares as well. And we did see Magnus not make moves when he was analyzing the position, but I wonder how much of it was going on in his head. Because look at the clock, right? He's the one who's used more time now.
Yeah.
Fabi looks comfortable making his moves. He's over 60 minutes, the time that the player started with.
Well, you know, I asked Fabi how he felt about this position in regards to his match chances. You got to win in order to force Armageddon. I said of all the random positions you could get, 960 of them to be exact, what does this one say to you? And he said, you know, I think this is actually gives me pretty good chances. He liked the fact that the pieces are coordinated well for a potential attack. Again, we come back to the idea that, by the way, we should note that black can actually castle on move 1. It's always fun to point out that some of the chess 960 positions allow that, but this probably isn't even a position where you want to do that, right? Castling doesn't really help black in terms of the coming maybe attack by the bishops, and it certainly doesn't solve the problem of the queen being in the corner. So I guess I'm just answering your question by calling on what Fabi said. He thinks that even though we saw that eval bar shift a little bit for black, as you pointed out, Magnus has used a lot of time. The position's back to equal. And from a practical point of view, Fabiano at least said that he likes his chances, particularly based on the starting spot of the bishops.
The thing is, right, in this position, yes, you can castle as both sides in one move, just swap the rook on g1 and the king on f1. But I don't think you want that, because the opposite side, the bishops are sniping across the board on that end. You already moved the h-pawn forward. What is the queen doing on h8? The answer is a big fat nothing to that. And I'm just wondering, Maurice, if in these kind of openings and the way it's gone, we're going to be seeing the king get safety on the left side of the board.
That's a lot of traffic to go through to get over here. Everything has to move. I guess only the knight and bishop on c1 have to move in order to get the king castled. So maybe it's not that much. This knight in the corner of the board is quite poorly placed, especially the future of this piece. Where is it headed? Where is this knight actually going? You always have to think about what your pieces are doing, and this knight doesn't seem as though it has much of a future at the moment. Maybe this pawn was meant to control this one as well. I'm not seeing exactly what white actually has. Where is the plan here for white? What gives white anything special in this position? It looks as though it's the kind of position where Fabi, guys, he's just gonna have to wing it. He's just gonna have to hope he outplays Magnus. Good luck with that, as this position structurally does not look like it favors white at all.
You know, Danny, Maurice mentioned the knight as a problem piece on a1. I've got a bigger problem with both these sides, right? What's the future of the queens here?
Yeah. I've gotten my queen trapped on h1 before in actual traditional chess. I don't know how I pulled that off, but it looked about as bad as the queen does here. And I want to go back to Maurice's point, because he talked about all the traffic in terms of castling, but look at Magnus. He's already preparing maybe to go for that plan. And the way Maurice talked about the fact that you would only really need to move both the knight and the bishop in order to get the king out of dodge over here if the fire ever got hot. So that just, I'm agreeing with Maurice that I think Magnus is doing well, and I think he's already cognizant of the fact that he might want to quickly jump to the queen side, depending on what Fabi does. Okay, but here comes maybe his start of opening up the queen. Is he going to go for something like e4? I don't know. Seems a little risky.
Guys, queens are so flexible. I don't exactly panic when I see a queen in the corner. The queens come into the game quite easily. And do you remember Alpha Zero, when it was actually putting the queen on h1 in its match against Stockfish? It intentionally went there in a couple of games. So queens are not the problem here. The real problem is, what are you doing with your pieces, and what is your future pawn break that's going to cause your opponent any trouble? And when I look for a pawn break, I'd love to play the move e4, but guess what? I can't put a knight on c3 to make that work. It's not possible. This knight has nowhere to go. So what is white's eventual plan? Is he looking for b4, b5, and do something on that side? Especially if in case you castle over there, he's prepared for that. It's just not clear where the pawn breaks are. And for that reason, I am still looking to see what the right plan is for white that's going to give anything at all in this position. It just looks like black is very comfortable.
But for me, this all just makes me so excited. I mean, we're like 5 moves in a chess game between world number 1 and world number 2, and we're already deep in analysis trying to solve the problem. I mean, normally when we're analyzing top level chess, guys, we're talking about their seconds at this point, mentioning the fact that we've seen this Ruy Lopez position 1,000 times, wondering what they might have had for breakfast. None of that is on the table here. We're like knee deep in the fact that one wrong plan here might kill Fabiano's chances to win this match. And anyway, it makes me just excited to see what they're going to give us here.
Yeah, it's awesome what you say. And you know, the point is that Fabi's just made 5 moves and all of them have been pawn moves, and that's just how difficult it is. That's an unconventional chess opening decision, right? Instead of taking the pieces out, He's trying to find lines to open up for the queen to come out. Eventually, we are going to see a piece move. You were asking where the break's coming from, Danny. And you know what? I think it's going to be Magnus that gets that break in first. You look at the position. He's got one knight out. The other one will also find a way, and that e-pawn will move forward to e5 at some point. And then there are going to be big questions for Fabi to answer. I don't think Fabi is happy with what he's got right now out of the opening. Not a single piece out. The queen's still struggling on that h1 square. You know, you put it on f3. There's bishop h3 check ideas that you're calculating.
Yep.
Things have started looking very tricky for white very quickly in a must-win game.
Bobby specifically mentioned that he was trying to induce g6 for black, which is what I talked about in terms of why maybe Magnus played h4 to stop white from driving a pawn to create weaknesses. But now he's played g3 for white. That means he has to really worry about this move. You already mentioned that bishop h3 check would be devastating if it happens. So what do you think, Maurice? I mean, we've got, by the way, though, all this talk about how Fabi hasn't gotten anything in a must-win game as white here in their second game. Magnus is the one who's been using more time. Just drawing attention to that.
I think it's a great point. I think it's a great point to talk about the clock situation. You want to induce your opponent into playing for a win when he only has to make a draw. That is something that maybe is part of the meta strategy here. But Tanya made a fantastic point. Who's got the break? Black has e5 lined up and ready. Like at any moment, this move can happen. Okay, if the knight gets to f3, it can shut that down, but it's not there yet. But this is a natural break. e4, not so much. And I don't see it ever happening, in fact, with the way this construction is, especially after this pawn push, the pawn on c5. So the break in chess, in the opening, it's all about those breaks. Who prepares them properly? Who gets to execute them? Who's restraining them? And it looks like it's black who has all that lined up in the future. Again, I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but this move c5, conceding the tension in the center, was so committal. I mean, absurdly committal, how much you shut down your options that it looks like it's going to have lasting ramifications on the structural possibilities of this game.
I agree. Although I'm gonna, now that we're here, might as well play devil's advocate, right? I mean, we're here to analyze. I'm starting to look at the structure and wondering, Maurice and Tanya, how Fabi might justify it. And I started thinking about, what if we go for a slower plan? This knight on e1 also needs to develop at some point, and I'm starting to look at the dark squares available, whether it be f4 and e5. I don't know that knight to d3 and bishop f4 might come first, whether you might even try to put a knight on e5 and then support it, calling black's bluff that perhaps parting with the dark square bishop isn't a great idea. Because I'm just trying to unpack, what is it that Fabiano wanted, right? The guy's a 2,800, third highest rated player in history last time I checked, right? He obviously understands that relieving the tension, normally not the strategic play. So maybe he has some sort of longer term vision for the future of where he wants to put his pieces, just throwing it out there.
And this is a tip that I picked up from the players in Weissenhaus. What they really like with the piece position, especially the knight, is to place it behind a pawn. You see that d pawn on d4. It would be ideal to get that knight to d3. It's a beautiful square because one, it's safe there, and then you're jumping around. But I think Fabi realizes now the problem with it. The point is that the black bishop then comes up to f5. And you've got this pin on the diagonal. You're controlling the e4 square. The bishop will move on to e4 as well. And then e5 will land eventually. Magnus has taken a decision, so still a bit of copycat chess there, opening up the queen, g6 on the board. So no e5 yet. Are you surprised to see this move? Because you mentioned that Fabi was hoping that this would happen.
It's funny because I don't think either player liked this idea in terms of their prep. I mean, who knows? We'll catch up with them after the game, but I do know, because I talked to Fabi, that he just mentioned immediately that he was worried about weakening the light squares. So seeing that Magnus took a bunch of time before ultimately committing to that makes me wonder that he probably didn't like it either, yet they're committed to it. And so I'm wondering that whether they have a larger strategic idea in mind, knowing they need to over-control some of these light squares, perhaps in order to start accessing them and complete development, whether Black House is long or not. So I'm curious, and Maurice, I wonder maybe you have another take on this, but one thing I will note, Fabi does recognize his time advantage. He immediately played knight b3. Magnus started to pick up the pace too here with the move knight to g4, though.
What the heck? I'm recoiling to see a move like knight to g4, and I'm wondering what it actually does. It does open up the possibility of playing for e5, but what if we threaten this piece with f3? I'm super surprised that he would allow the possibility of getting e4 in with a preparation like f3. Remember, if white could just move a couple of things, he'll castle this way. He'll castle to the left side of the board. I can't say queen side because the queen's sitting over at h1, but he could castle to the left side of the board, and with f3 and e4, he's got action. Desperately so, because he didn't have any breaks at all that we could find. But Magnus is inducing this. I mean, what's wrong with f3, in fact? If we just take a look at it, this knight, it obviously has to move because there's just no sacrificial idea that makes any sense. So let's back this piece up. And what does he gain? He's gained a weakness maybe on this square. His knight can come and attack this pawn. But it does seem as though this option has come into position. Magnus has sharpened the game dramatically with this move, knight g4. Very unconventional, even for chess 960, to be moving this knight by itself. It's the only developed piece you had. You could have developed something else, but he decided to make this very provocative move early on. Does Fabi now have a chance to get back that energy that he wanted so he can have those pawn breaks that he desperately needed?
Wow. I'm looking at the fact this game could go any direction. Black could castle short at a moment's notice and try to start playing e5 and advance over here because on Maurice's point, if f3 is played and we suddenly have some weaknesses to poke and prod at, maybe Magnus tries to play over here. Neither player has solved the problem of the queen in the corner yet, but we also still might have one side quickly skip out of town, and just like that, the other player's left holding the bag on the king side, maybe with a bunch of weaknesses. So I feel like I just want to get 10 moves further along so that they can show us what's inside their 2,800 brains, because there's a lot of blunder potential here.
That's the beauty of freestyle, right? Every move is awesome to decipher. Now, knight g4, yes, you're provoking f3, but it's not an easy move to make on the board because your king is still on that file. You're still opening up for the black queen to simply come to f6. I don't think Magnus plans to retreat the knight from where it came from. That knight is going to go to the edge of the board to eventually come to the center. Knight h6, knight f5 is the plan. You would have already weakened that g-pawn. And to answer your question, I still think the players really want to get their king to the other side, not the right side, but towards that bishop on c8. It's not that far away off, and then you're suddenly questioning your decisions of playing f3, of playing e4 with that king still stuck on f1. Fabi still looks like he's behind in development. You know, with that knight on g4 and e5 threatening first, I'm still picking black here, and it's not because Magnus Carlsen's playing with that color right now.
It's the first time Fabi's been on the clock, if you will, just to take note that he really hasn't spent any time until this moment. He blitzed out knight to b3 basically instantly. Maybe a bit of a knee-jerk reaction of, hey, I'm just not going to let this knight be stranded and become a donkey later on in the game. I'm going to develop it before it's too late. But now that Magnus played knight g4, he's like, well, maybe I don't know where I'm going next with this pony. But Maurice, you got something for us over there.
Well, it's funny that you said that because I was trying to figure out the answer to your question. What's the plus that made him play this move, c5? What does he have? The imbalance that he has, as Jeremy Silman talks about in his great book, How to Reassess Your Chess. What does white have that black doesn't? And what white does have is the ability to put a knight on a5. This knight cannot go to b6. This knight could go on a5 and pressure this pawn if this bishop ever leaves. So that is just a nuance. You can't play the move b6 because then you drop the c6 pawn. So he has the bind on the structure, and it could be some kind of positional nuance he plays for later, depending how the game flows. So that's what I was thinking when suddenly I was blindsided by the move knight g4. I'm like, what the heck is that on this side of the board? Now he might be like, forget all this nonsense. This pony should not have showed up on my side of the board. It's something that you tell your beginning students. Don't move the same piece twice. Your knight's not going to dominate the game by itself. What is Magnus thinking playing this extremely provocative move? I think it's a very challenging position for white now, because when you see a move like this as a player, you want to refute it. You're not thinking, oh, let me just make a couple of moves, ignore the fact that you just broke a tried and true positional principle. I'm trying to refute your move. I can now get potentially a big advantage if I find the right sequence. And by the way, the engine does not like the move knight to g4. It thinks it gives white a very powerful advantage, beginning with the move f3. Maybe I'm overstating powerful, but f3 is the key move here. It is the move that Magnus is daring Fabi to play. Will he do it?
He doesn't. He doesn't go for f3. Because it's a tough move, Danny, to make. You know, with all the weaknesses, it might be the best move according to the engines, but you've got two humans playing there, and then you're looking at your king position. and you just decide that you need to get your pieces out. And he plays what, according to me, is quite a human approach here. We were talking about knights behind the pawn, knight d3, bishop f5, now pinning that knight to the bishop on b1. I still think e5 is coming next.
You said that Fabi played the human approach. I think Magnus played the human response right back at him, developed the bishop to f5. And I want to just point out that I think he probably intends to meet knight a5 with castles. Oh, wait, okay, queen takes d4 is possible. There's a pawn hanging, and that likely leads to bigger issues because after queen takes d4, you're threatening to eliminate the knight and checkmate on f2. But I did want to point out that castles long was possible to defend the pawn, just for kicks and giggles, because how often does a king move 3 squares to defend one of the weak peshki there? All right, so knight a5 isn't going to happen, but I think you're right telling you that e5 might have been on the table for Magnus as a possibility, but he didn't go for it.
I like bishop f5.
Bishop f5 develops a piece, and Fabiano has already moved, and Magnus returns the favor. So the pace is picking up here.
And f3 on the board, it is something he knew he wanted to do. There's no question about it. He knew he wanted to play f3, and yes, indeed, e5 was the best move. We talk about pawn breaks, pawn breaks, pawn breaks. It's the essence of the opening in chess. And I think your point, Tanya, about it being a human instinct to not really expose your king early, that's what took over Fabi to not play f3 right away. So you give him this position at home to take a look at, he's like, yeah, f3 is the move. I should have played that right away. But he's got to make a decision, critical decision right now. He can't lose this game or even draw the game, so he didn't want to take that chance. But after Magnus now misses the actual e5 break and played the move bishop f5, Fabi said, I think I will go for this now. I don't feel the same sense of danger. You had mentioned something like queen f6, Tanya, that kind of idea. No, all that's gone. Now let's get down to business and do what you're supposed to do in chess, which is secure the center with pawns and look for effective pawn breaks in the long run.
I think it was absolutely necessary for Fabi to play f3, whether you like it or not in this position. Allowing that knight to live on g4 and for e5 to come next with the bishop out would have been absolutely disastrous. And how adventurous is Fabi feeling now? Is he going to go in with further pawn breaks? He's going to be thinking about that. You know, the one thing that we've seen about Magnus, right? When he's got a lead in a mini match like this, a lot of his mindset is about trying to get the most combative position. He wants to have fun, you know, he wants a challenging position. I think ideas like knight g4, provoking f3 is about that. You know Fabi well, Danny. What is his mindset coming into a game like that? What does he have going on to know that he needs to put this a fight to take it to the Armageddon?
I think Fabi's one of the most consistent players in the world. And what I mean by that in this sense is that I think he works hard on actually not letting his mental state get rattled and not allowing himself to change up his approach regardless of the situation. Now, he's still human, and objectively, everyone, including he, knows he has to win. But I think that Fabi tries to, okay, as I say that, here comes the heart rate saying, yeah, how's that, Danny, for looking calm? Apparently, he's rocking a medium mood level and a 92% heart rate. But he doesn't look it ever, does he? Fabi does stay stoic. And I guess my point was, I think Fabi would say, I'm going to try not to overpress because I want to give myself an opportunity and not fall into Magnus's trap of going crazy thinking I have to win. But I did want to point out one idea that maybe is possible here for White. We keep talking about the fact that maybe the players are obsessed with castling queenside. If he does develop the bishop, not only does it have a cute little home on f2, how often does that happen? That's adorable, right? Tuck the bishop in there. But it actually would get the bishop out of the way and allow White to complete this plan if indeed he does want to get the king out of the king side, which is not just about safeguarding the king. If this king is not on f1, suddenly g4 is on the table. e4, of course, has already been on the table. So I'm actually kind of liking Fabi's chances, given how confident he was before the game started that he would get a balanced opportunity to play for a win. So despite what the heart rate says, I think he's looking fresh. Headphones look good.
I'm not sure the word adorable appears in any of the old classical chess manuals, but point taken, the bishop on f2 would be actually on a nice square guarding this g-pawn. And I will say that the reason why f3 was played right now is because this bishop on f5 took away that square from the knight. Because this knight, when it goes to h6, remaneuvers, repositions itself to f5, and this bishop on b8 is hitting the pawn, as would be this knight. And it does create some tension there that White is forced to protect that square pretty quickly. So Fabi, when he saw the bishop come on f5, I think that was the clue. I'm going to guess inside his head that move was the move that made him say, okay, I play f3 now, because where's your knight going next? If I don't chase this bishop in any way, I don't challenge it, your knight just simply doesn't come back into the game that quickly, and I don't have to worry about the compromised structure. So yes, move the bishop. By the way, this knight is pinned. It's kind of weird to see a knight on d3 get pinned by a bishop on f5 to a bishop on b1 inside of 8 moves. You've never seen that in 518. It just wouldn't. How would you do it? But here it is, a pin that we never see in regular chess. But move this bishop, you do protect, and then when you castle, again, your king protects the bishop. So I think the most natural move would be some kind of bishop move. They're just giving a queen move as also possible, with the bishop move only being slightly behind it, something like queen g2 or queen h2. I'm not somebody who really worries about queens early on in the game. I think the queen will figure it out in time. I want to get this bishop out and have the option to castle on, I'm about to say queen side. Get that out of your mouth now. You know, you're an OG. You're like, that's the queen side over there. No, no, no. It's just the left side when you're playing in chess, in freestyle chess.
I love how Maurice just casually dropped position 518. For those who don't know, position 518 is traditional chess. It is regular chess, as you know. Maurice is slowly memorizing all 960 exact positions. But you just dropped that 518, like, you know.
Well, Tanya was the one who told me it was 518, so I'm not going to take credit for it.
Okay.
But I do remember, you know, if you tell me a number, I'm going to remember it. And I'm not memorizing these positions. No, too many of them. Too many of them. What you want to memorize are the principles. What you want to know is what you should be doing in the opening. You want to coordinate your forces. You want to control the center with pawns if possible. You want to get your king to safety. Those are tried and true principles that are not going away. But the one I said first was actually the most challenging in freestyle, and that is coordinating your forces. How do you make pieces do the dance that you're used to making them do from 518 when it's some random position like this one, 180? You have to do a 180 almost to appreciate what you're sitting in front of you. And this is kind of a bit of a mess. Ain't nobody seen nothing like this before. I will tell you straight, like, what? What is this structure? How did you even get here? So it is a serious challenge for them. And Fabi did play the move bishop g5, which is a more active square for the bishop. Is he cajoling black into playing the move f6? Not clear, but now it's getting interesting. Now we have a position that we could say maybe white can start thinking, hey, I can possibly pull this one off.
And Fabi right now is provoking Magnus, right? He's made sure, at least for now, that black can't get the king to safety, go castling on the left side of the board, because the e7 pawn is under attack with the bishop that's just been played on g5. Now, Magnus can return the favor, go f6, but that's also a very committal decision. You're blocking your own queen on that h8 square, you know, somewhat weakening those kingside pawns. You'll have to take another decision whether to push g5 or e5. But I do feel that that's the move on Magnus's radar right now. You want to get your king to safety without giving the pawn on e7. What are the chances we get f6 right now?
Yeah, I think they're pretty high. I mean, I mentioned that f2 is an adorable square for the dark square bishop, but f7 is also a potential square for the knight if you want to relocate and still try for this idea of e5 that we keep talking about. But I want to point something out. Fabi obviously had the option to go to e3 right away. He went here for a reason. He likes the idea of inducing this, and I'm starting to think more and more that Fabi's, you know, foresight vision here, the crystal ball that he's got in his mind, is that he actually thinks he's up a tempo or two that are critical on Magnus, because if he induces f6, that means black's king would forever be in danger on this side, just like white's. Black is probably even more committed to going to the queen side. If that ends up happening and white ends up being first with moves like knight a5 and b4 and b5, I don't know that this knight is getting into the game. You can't play b6 without c6 becoming an issue. So I'm just sort of playing out, you know, what might happen. If both sides castled long, I think advantage white now, because white is getting the initiative and might actually be putting pressure over here before black ever really had an opportunity to finish development. So I'm just trying to think about what Fabi is trying to do here with this sort of shuffling.
Yeah, it's move 9 and it's absolutely nuts already. I wish, Danny, there was a way to get inside Magnus's head. Can you think of anything?
I wish there were formats and organizers who had an idea, like maybe we could give the players an opportunity to tell us what they're thinking about in the middle of the game.
Well, guess what? We've got just that for you, because Magnus Carlsen has just been to the confessional.
I think Fabiano played the opening in what was clearly the critical way. I thought c4 was the obvious choice, and then to grab space the way he does. Like my knight in the corner is it's a bit weird now. My position is very solid, and this knight maneuver is a bit weird. I'm trying to provoke f3, and then I can go back with the knight to the edge, and maybe his pieces are a little bit uncoordinated, but it feels a bit weird that I'm just basically moving one knight. But I think for now I have at least practically reasonable counter chances, but I think he's definitely got something to play for after the opening.
So Magnus saying the knight maneuver a bit weird, but also fun, provoking f3, which by the way now did happen on the board, and Magnus Carlsen's trying to get his other knight into the position. What do you think? How successful has Magnus been with everything that we just heard? Although I will say, Danny, I thought he would be a lot more comfortable with what he's got, but it looked like he thinks that Fabi does have chances to play for more in this opening.
Yeah, I think he does, and I think Fabi does. We see it on the board, and he also did quickly mention he was worried about his other knight being out of play. We were talking about that point right before we threw to the confessional video, and Magnus tries to solve that with the move that hit us while Magnus was talking, knight to c7, trying to solve that problem of that knight being left out of the game. So again, I think Magnus likes, or at least is aware that Fabi has chances here, and he's being careful.
Well, let's understand a very big principle in chess, and it's the drawback principle. That is, any move you make, no matter how positive, comes with some kind of minus if it's just undefending a square. So if we go back just one move pair to this position, this bishop is sitting on this square. It could go to e3, very natural square. We discussed that. Just develop your piece and then think about castling. The bishop on e3 guards this pawn, and you keep going. But bishop g5 was the move chosen. More aggressive, prophylactic, we said, and the competing principles. Yes, it's difficult to castle, although the engine says maybe even you can sack this pawn. But I've made it more difficult for you to castle on this side because you have to think about this pawn. But what do? You fix your bishop as a target. And Magnus recognizing, yes, you have that aggression, but now when I bring my knight to c7, I'm about to go to e6 and attack the piece you just put there. So that will be an issue. And also, because your bishop's not on e3, I'm going to be aggressing this pawn on d4 as well. Don't forget the queen is sitting in the corner, eyeing this pawn for the moment. So yes, bishop g5 was the more aggressive move. It certainly did have this intention of taking the pawn on e7, or at least preventing you from castling so easily, but it has opened up this possibility for black, and it's perfect timing. Knight to c7, Magnus with his sense of harmony, he's a systems thinker, he knows the ideas he's going for and the setup he can get. If he gets it, you're in trouble. I think this idea of knight e6 might have escaped Fabi, and right now he's going to go into a deep think to try to figure out exactly what to do about it.
He's doing just that. Knight e7. I will add to what Maurice just said, Danny, that black knight gets to e6, and the big question is, can you still capture on g5? Because that knight that's been on a bit of a journey, Magnus's other knight on h6, does not have too many squares. So how much of a big threat is that? I think the bigger problem is that central d4 pawn.
Yeah.
That will be under attack with the queen that we've been talking about out of place. And one of the cool things about freestyle chess is if you can find a way to develop or activate a piece without moving it, that's success already.
Yep.
And he's been able to do that with the queen on h8. Find a target.
The queen on h8 developed, spying the d4 pawn where she stands, which reminds me, I kept seeing this idea suggested by the computer of queen h2, and I was like, what exactly is the point? But now I realize, I think the computer also wants to develop the white queen by getting it to f2, where she guards the d4 pawn, and perhaps is in an overall more helpful position to whatever white's plan will be. So that's maybe an idea Fabi goes for, especially given that Magnus declined to play f6 and is going to create other problems. Although I do like your point. Oh, okay, we have castles long. We've been waiting for either side to really commit the king, and Fabi is the first to blink, putting the king over there on c1.
This is a highly committal move because of this move, knight to e6. That's a serious issue here. The knight going to e6 will apply some pressure. Don't forget that bishop takes is always on tap. If this knight moves and you decide to capture, you open up a file towards this situation as well. This pawn on g3 is being attacked. This king will be able to castle at some point when it solves all the problems. And here, it's actually a tricky situation. Is this pawn really under attack? The engine says no, because it wants to move the bishop back and say, I dare you, double dare you to take this pawn. Well, now suddenly this queen on h8 is overworked as it's guarding 2 knights. When have you ever seen this happen in chess? A queen on h8 guarding 2 knights in this way? The answer is never. But this obviously blunders a piece after knight takes d4, queen takes, and suddenly you're dropping the h6 knight with check. So the pawn is actually defended, and Fabi realizes that he can do that pretty easily. But then you wonder why it is in this position then that his bishop is actually on g5 when the knight has come to that square with tempo. Maybe the bishop should have been back on e3. That all doesn't matter. Nevertheless, at least white is pretty much developed. The bishop on b1, I would say, is well stationed. And maybe e4 might happen. I remember you mentioned the move g4 at some point, Danny. This is starting to get to crisis mode. I'm starting to like what we're going to see. Will the game explode in just the next couple of moves as something like e4 gets banged down on the board? We're going to see it happen, I'm sure. This is the kind of stuff we look forward to when we look for dynamics in a must-win chess game.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It reminds me, there's the principle in Chess 518, to use the number Tanya has now reminded us forever, that 518 is traditional chess. The principle is don't open the center until you've developed. Don't open the center until your king is out of the way, right? In Chess 960, I feel like there's an unspoken principle of don't commit to something until you've got your position coordinated. And that's a loose way of sort of the same principle. And if you look at Fabiano's position, it's a couple of awkward pieces away from looking like a traditional chess position, Tanya. White is castled. Yes, the bishop on b1 makes you wonder how you got there. The knight on b3 is sort of breaking a Soviet chess school principle, putting a knight in front of the pawn. But overall, actually, with the rooks connected, talking to each other, and the fact that we now have pawn breaks that you start to think about because black's king is in more potential danger, I guess what I'm saying is I actually think white's position looks much closer to a coordinated chess 518 position, which makes me worry for Magnus.
But do you think that's the reason for that is also a castle bias, that white has managed to get the king to safety while Magnus hasn't yet moved the magical piece to c8 right now? And once that happens, we can have a similar argument for black as well, right? But I do see the piece coordination point, because suddenly you're questioning what on earth is that knight on h6 doing? If you have to give up your bishop on that light square to get it out to f5, that's not an ideal answer either. So I want to ask you this question, right? We see the eval bar say that the position's pretty level. We've had, what move are we on? We're on move 10. Do you want to play this position with white or with black, Danny?
Do I want to play the position with for either side? I have no idea. I think I still like white a little bit. I like the idea that f3 is affording me some flexible chances to break through. And I think that even if black castles long, white has a little more space. We criticize c5, rightfully so, I think. It relieved the tension. But also, this knight is awkwardly in front of the pawn when we really want this. If this bishop wasn't here and there were tactical problems, this is the move we want to bring the bishop and queen together, along with the knight being well placed behind a pawn, undermining the center. I'm not going to get that. I also think that white is a little bit closer to playing for something aggressive. So, I mean, Fabiano is obviously on the clock for a reason. He has to decide. Is he going for Maurice's bishop d2? We pointed out the pawn can't be taken. Is he going bishop e3? I don't know. Is he laughing in the face of danger? As you said, Tanya, this is not a threat. The knight is trapped.
I actually don't think it's a threat. And if you have to, in that particular position, once the white pawn gets to g5, go into that structure where you give up that knight on f5. Maybe we can just have the arrows to show that, or make a move that doesn't, that might demonstrate that point. Yep. I think knight takes bishop, pawn takes knight. And if you have to go bishop takes knight at the end of that line, let's make a non-move, Danny. Okay. For example, like a3. Maurice pointed out, knight takes pawn is not possible. And I think after bishop takes knight, bishop takes bishop, knight f5, I don't know how happy you are evaluating this position after bishop takes f5, pawn takes bishop. But the same idea works to perfection if white's pawn is on h4. Then that rook on g8 is really a big piece.
Yeah.
So you have to have these dynamics in mind as well. So I wonder how much of a margin does Fabi have right now? Is bishop d2 really the only way to keep any sort of advantage in the position? Let's bring up our live board on this moment right now. You said that you like white. because you've got the central breaks. They will lead to some weaknesses of squares. So I'm going to turn to Maurice right now. Maurice, are you picking black or white at this moment?
I'm picking neither. I'm sorry, I can't commit. Not in this position. This position is full of potential, to be sure, and I don't know what's going on. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I don't know what's going on. Yes, the engine's saying it's a little bit better for white. Yes, bishop d2 can be played, but you are making fantastic points. This knight on b3 is not looking so sexy. I really want it on c3. I want to be able to play e4, but I can't do that because it's on b3, and this pawn needs some kind of protection. This structure doesn't, there's potential. I really want to play e4. If I can make that work, I'm taking white all day. If I could just make e4 work, that's still not yet in the position. And black does look, except for this one piece on h6, like everything else is pretty smooth. I'm going to say that. The pieces look like where you might have in like a Gurganidze, Caro-Kann. I mean, that's what I'm seeing in this position. Normally, the bishop will be over on this side. This knight will be over on that side. But it's looking like black maybe it still has flexibility in which side to castle. There have been no compromises in the pawn chain as yet. I do want to point out a line that's really important, though. This move, queen h2, the very interesting very interesting response to this move is the immediate bishop takes d3. That's the grandmaster trade, again, according to Jeremy Silman in How to Reassess Your Chess. Because giving up a bishop for a knight creates an immediate long-term imbalance. You give your opponent the two bishops, why would you just give them that advantage right away? But here, there's some dynamic questions. If you make a natural-looking move, like bishop takes, now suddenly knight to f5, also unnatural because you're giving away this trade, you think. But because this pawn's under pressure, this pawn's under triple pressure actually at the moment. And if we try to double these pawns, because we're fracturing the structure, suddenly that bishop on g5 ain't looking so hot. And the rook's file is opened up. And do you really want to move your bishop back and give this kind of flow on this side, like a castle? And there's just interesting dynamics where I think we're not going to complain about this position for black. This is the kind of crazy chess that could happen at any moment.
But it will not, because Fabi's just played the move that you were talking about. Bishop d2 is on the board. No more trades on g5 for the moment. Now the big question for Magnus Carlsen is, does he go for the line that we were looking at, trading on d3? Maurice showed that knight coming to f5. One thing's for sure, knight takes pawn right now is a big blunder. The queen on h8 overloaded, so that pawn's not hanging. Don't even think about trying to touch it. The other point, can Magnus get his king to the other side of the board? He's trying to contemplate all of these factors. What are the chances that he takes this big decision, right, where he gives up the bishop and plays for that activity on the g-file?
To me, it feels like such a counterintuitive thing to do, as Maurice called it, a grandmaster trade. I would say it's a super, it would be a Magnus Carlsen thing to do. And by the way, it is also what the computer thinks black should do. So that just tells you Magnus Carlsen plays chess more like a computer than probably any human on the planet. That's high quality stuff. And after bishop takes, black can go for this idea of knight f5 Maurice was already talking about. It hits the d4 pawn and hits g3. And as has been pointed out a few times, this trade is actually really helpful for black. So it's funny, that was just a move that I would not want to play, parting ways with the light squared bishop. But the concrete aspects of the position are that knight f5 might actually work out well for black. And if anyone makes concrete decisions despite how anti-human they look, it's usually Magnus Carlsen. He figures out a lot of these ideas in real time. So we'll see if he goes for bishop takes d3 or finds something else. His heart rate, by the way, still lower than Fabiano's, just generally a little bit calmer, apparently.
And let's point out also that GM trade, that bishop for knight, in this position, it's pretty concrete. If takes, knight to f5 hits this g-pawn, and the engine's giving the g-pawn away. e3, you can have my pawn if you want to. And now the move queen h3, hitting this knight. Knight's got to go somewhere. Guess what? We're going to take this bad boy. And now suddenly we have the game opening up, and queen takes on f5. And who do you like here will be the real question about what happens next. Who do you like in this position? Is black, because black hasn't quite castled yet, is black in any trouble here? I don't see concretely exactly how, but I would start leaning on the white side a little bit. Like, yeah, I kind of like just having the queen in a more aggressive position, eyeballing this pawn. Your queen's still stuck in the corner. I just feel a little something for white right here. So that is a dynamic position for Magnus to consider. Would he want to go for this, or we just dial it back a little bit and look for other moves?
No, he's taking his time because it's a really big one, right? You create this imbalance, you give up your bishop. You don't only have to calculate the whole line, you have to evaluate that last position at the end. Not an easy thing to do, but it's Alpha Zero and it's Alpha Magnus. If anybody is capable of taking the superhuman decision, just give up your bishop, spoil your own pawn structure for activity on G3, and he reaches out and he does it.
He's going for it. That's what he does. Alpha Magnus, as you called. By the way, Alpha Fabi going right back at him with bishop d3. We saw that blue arrow appear. Whenever it does, that means the computer thinks it's the only move. And on that point, Maurice's idea of e3, according to the engine, the only move here for white to maintain the balanced evaluation. And again, we already talked about the fact that bishop takes f5 is not ideal right away, opening up the g file. But e3, as Maurice showed, works out. It's an interesting move. I wonder how deeply the players went into that line, because again, easy for us to do here. We have each other. We're pretty good. I mean, I'm kind of blending into the wall here with the shirt I chose. I could probably not.
I don't know about you. I don't consider myself that good when I look at these guys.
No, of course not. But I'm saying, like, we've got each other. We've got the eval. I think that this is actually a tricky line to evaluate, and I wonder how deeply Magnus went. We're going to find out.
But the move e3 itself, right, Maurice, is if you do see knight takes pawn, the g3 pawn is not great. Going into queen h3, it's not a very long line to calculate. And by the way, we do have a move. Fabi finds the best move for the third time in a row. He went bishop d2, he played e3. The whole point is keeping that d4 pawn consolidated. You need to keep your center defended. At some point, given one more opportunity, white wants to get the queen into the game next. I think the queen will head to h3, regardless of whether black takes on g3 or not, because let's point out, the light squared bishop is off the board for Magnus Carlsen.
Well, again, we get back to this we lean on what we know and opening setups. And when I look at this, I used to play the black side of this Caro-Kann with this tricky little system by playing this exact pawn structure, but also playing with h5 early in the opening. And usually this pawn is sitting on e5. So it's a bit of a different kind of setup, to be sure, but I'm starting to see those features appear in this position where black is very solid. You might crack my pawn structure, but everything else is fairly solid. And what are you exactly doing? And especially since you have to give back this light square bishop in order to get that compromise situation. Black's pieces, look, can we just stop now and start looking back at 518? What are the bad pieces here? If only this queen, and he did play e3, right? So let me put that on the board. If this queen sat on e2, would you argue with white's position at all in terms of just a setup that white could get in 518? You'd be like, okay, that knight on b3 looks a little weird, but we'll live with it, right? That looks pretty normal. And if you look at this position with the black pieces, if the king sat here and this bishop maybe was on c7, you probably wouldn't argue. Well, sorry, I made a move there. Didn't mean to do that. If the king were castled, for example, you would only argue about that queen in the corner. Everything else looks pretty gorgeous. Okay, of course, we could just kind of take this knight and mess up the position. But their pieces have gravitated now to natural squares. How many moves are we in, guys? 13. 13 moves in.
Move, by the way.
And they're showing how they can coordinate pieces. That's the essence when you know how to play freestyle. And what was the move?
We have b6 for Magnus, which not so hot according to the computer, a move that is a human move. Often you try to undermine these pawn chains by attacking either the lead or the base pawn, and in this case, black has an opportunity to do it, but computer not so happy with that. Haven't looked at what the move it's suggesting, but it feels, I think, just that this was the best idea, the variation we were looking at. Magnus instead plays b6. Tanya, what do you think here?
I don't think he's happy about this move. You get the feeling when all the pieces are on the other side of the board and Magnus has to play b6 that perhaps he is feeling uncomfortable about his position. He needs to take a drastic piece of action right now because of all these ideas that what Maurice was telling. Get the white queen into the game and then it's a beautiful structure. You've got more space. You're the one who's breaking in the center first. Black's king not exactly feeling safe on the left side because the white knight could have jumped to a5. So this decision by Magnus, and look at him on the screen as well. It's not exactly a picture of relaxation by Magnus right now.
I agree.
I think he's feeling the pressure.
Fabi's not even at the board. And I want to show that line again because I really agreed with Maurice when he said that the end of this variation would have him kind of leaning doing the lean toward white side. It's funny because the computer says, it's close to equal, but I feel like all three of us were like, this just feels better for white. And Magnus probably, as a human being, as good as he is still a human being, probably looked at it the same way for all the reasons we talked about. I mean, white has an eye here, white has an eye here, the king is stuck. By the way, knight a5 is just constantly on the agenda now, and this is so irritating. So I was anticipating that because I was asking the question, I wonder how deep Magnus went. When Fabi played e3, if he hadn't gone deep enough to think about it the way the computer would, I'm not surprised at all that he didn't take this pawn. And now that he's played b6, he may regret it because what the computer thinks the best move is this move f4.
I'm stunned by that. To be straight up f4?
Putting a stop to all of the ideas on the diagonal and making sure that white can hold the pawn chain together, I guess.
I hear you, and that's an extremely committal move, f4. It is a lockdown Maroxy bind on dark squares, if you will. Well, the point is, there's no breaks for black anywhere. Well, we do have this little issue here that white's not really worried about at the moment. But this move, that's to me an impressive move to find. I want to see Fabi play that move. That I really do, because to me, that separates the 2800s from the rest of us. This is a serious move in this position. The engine agrees this is a very strong move. It says knight h6, king b1, knight g4. Why did we allow this knight to actually even plant itself on what looks like another great square? It's threatening knight f2 with a monster fork. I mean, I got to really understand. I know it's easy to defend. You can play rook gf1, for example. But this is a serious commitment to play the move f4 and grab that space. Very instructive move. Very instructive. If Fabi plays this move, I'm going to say Magnus is in trouble. He finds a move like that one, Magnus will be in trouble because it means Fabi's got the zen of the position and he's feeling the flow. Let's see if he finds the move f4 right now, because I think it's a big moment in the game.
f4 is really cool, and we'd all love to see it, but I don't think it's the only way to keep an advantage. The point is that it's really hard for Magnus, even after getting b6 in, to actually trade on c5. And I know, Danny, that's exactly what you were thinking about, because it's really the first thing that comes to mind, right? Yep. What actually happens with the follow-up. But the problem with that is then the dark squared bishop gets super active. Once you take pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, there's no bishop e5, thanks to that f4 move. And suddenly the bishop's coming to c3. And hello, what is the queen on h8 even doing? You know, queen f6, bishop c3, might just be game over on the spot.
Yeah.
And you're looking at all these ideas. But Danny, even without f4, I think the position has so much harmony for white. And by the way, we do have a move, and he's done it.
What?
The world number 2.
You know, by the way, did anyone notice the little bit of Fabi pushed it and he kind of twisted it when he did?
Yo.
He did a little bit, which I'm just saying. There are. Look, I'm not making a subtle nod to the GOAT Garry Kasparov. It is a subtle nod. Gary used to do that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a subconscious thing players do at times. Chess is a physical game when you're at the board. There's an energy and a presence, and sometimes when you play a move you like, there's a little bit of mojo there, and Fabi pushed that pawn confidently, and you called it, Maurice. You said if Fabi plays this move, you think Magnus is in trouble, and we've got Magnus on the pawn cam here. I don't know what else to call it.
Is that heart rate any worse? No, but f4, I'm liking the fact that he played it. Personally, I didn't have the chess understanding deep enough to play this move and feel like my position is going to continue to have flow. I would have rather kept it flexible. The possibility of being able to play e4, the possibility of maybe hitting with g4, to shut that down completely with this move outside of my pay grade. This one says, I have space and I'm going to slowly build around it. And guess who has the breaks? e4 is still here. You can't really stop these moves. Even with the move knight to h6, by the way, I'm thinking, I'd be very worried if f5 stopped me. For example, if I played this move, what is wrong with the move f5? Like the engine says, okay, that's completely irrelevant. We're going to play on this side of the board. Now that's some stuff. Bishop a6 being played, eyeballing this. This is all no counterplay for you at all. You got no breaks over here. And you know that b6 move you played? We're going to start showing why it's weak. And that's what this move now I'm looking at is about. We're shutting down your play on one side. Well, f5 I made intentionally, but it's not that good. But now it's some weaknesses on the structure. The pawn on c6 is permanently weakened by that what? Trade on d3, giving the light square bishop real venom to go after this pawn on c6, and this position is actually critical for black. It's falling apart right now. What a move, what a moment. F4. Will he be able to turn the screws on Magnus and turn this into a real match?
He's doing everything right? An extremely classy move, and you've got rid of one of the bishop. The light squared bishop's off the board. F4 really restricts the other bishop now, and Magnus has to find a way to try to break free. He does come back with the knight, so not allowing any trades in that. I'm expecting him to bring the queen into the game. The white's got a simple plan. It's easy to play. You know, you've got the harmony, move that king aside, get the rook to c1, start targeting that pawn on c6. Magnus needs to find a way to break down. Look at the speed with which Fabi's playing.
He's got it.
Playing the line that you suggested, Tanya. I want to point out really quick that the line you mentioned, we got so caught up in the hype of Fabi finding F4, but it really is critical that this move works because the natural move capturing here doesn't do anything good for black's position. I just want to point that out because I think that's actually a really critical point. Otherwise, you think that black might try to open up the position and go for things, but you can't really go all the way because white will then liquidate and start gobbling up pawns. Just calculating it to make sure that there was nothing missed as if the computers weren't always right. And this move was just super critical. Magnus has played knight h6, and Fabi immediately finds the move you said. King b1, the rook is coming to c1, the queen side is about to be undermined, and there are no breakthroughs coming on this side of the board for black.
And if you're forced to play b5, that's a sad move to make. Because then that bishop on b8 is a dead piece for the rest of the game. But then otherwise, how do you keep c6 pawn under control?
I'm not feeling anything.
The chess highlight of the year, the Freestyle Chess Summit in Singapore. Magnus Carlsen versus Fabiano Caruana, an epic showdown of chess giants.
There's a pawn on b4, pawn on a3.
The evening before the summit, there was already a spectacular exhibition fight in the head-in-hand format. Above the rooftops of Singapore at the Swiss Hotel de Stamford, Magnus Carlsen in the team with Tanya Sachev against Fabiano Caruana and Maurice Ashley, with a win for Sachev and Magnus Carlsen.
World-class chess being played here. The more you look at it, the more you're liking white. And yes, Magnus played this maneuver, getting a great square for his piece, but white will have all the play on this side. That space with the pawn on c5 now starting to look juicy. Now it's like, yeah, okay, maybe I didn't play it the complete best way in the beginning, but don't mess around and make a couple of mistakes, which has now happened. And it looks like Magnus is the one in trouble after this move, king b1 with that plan that we're all talking about.
I'm liking Fabi's chance, and I'm liking our chances, all of us together, to be stuck in this vault for a long time. We might not get out of here for a while.
Say that.
This might go down to the wire.
I don't know about you, but I'm going to get out of here.
I want to see that.
I mean, I'm saying I like Fabiano's chances here as white. Again, remind everybody that he's down a game in the match. He has to win.
He does.
For this to go to Armageddon. And as he said at the start of this whole thing, when I interviewed him quickly before the game, he said, of all the positions to be in when you know you have to win, he thought he'd have an opportunity in this game, and he's getting it. And Magnus down on the clock by about 6 minutes. Got to figure out what to do against a very straightforward plan here coming for white.
And this is the other thing that's so exciting about freestyle, right? That taking a lead in the match is just not good enough. How many times we've seen, a play, especially a mini match of just 2 games.
Yep.
You get that lead in, and then you know exactly what to do in the next game. And even playing with white, it's so hard to play for the little advantage.
Yep.
But here, anything can happen. But that said, Fabi's just played top-class chess. We were talking about leaving day one back behind. He's done it. That's on the yacht. That's deep in the sea right now. He's really enjoying what he's got. This is pretty much the maximum. So easy for white to play. Get that rook on c1, start targeting c6, asking all the questions. And I've been seeing Magnus on our screen, Danny. It looks like he's hating his position.
Yeah, he's deep head in hand right there. That's usually not a head in hand position you see for a confident, happy Magnus. Fabi though, looking poised, ready to strike back here. And Magnus said this to Maurice in the post-game interview that despite having the game advantage, he knew that he was going to have a dogfight today because that is one of the things that is different than in freestyle. He knows he can't just lock up the game and go for a draw.
And he looks frustrated right now with what he's got because it's just so difficult with black to actually find an active plan. And that's the problem. You don't have g5, you don't have e5 anymore. You know, your queen and rook are still stuck. If you get your king to safety on the right side, if you castle right now, white is the one who's looking at all sorts of breaks on that side. It's white all over the board here. You know, Maurice, we talk about left, right, queen side, king side, call it what you want. But right now, Fabi's all over Magnus's back.
Well, it's really important, you know, it's all about that break. It's all about that break. That's chess. What break are you going to make? What a break are you planning for? It's not about attacking stuff right away. It's not about winning pieces somehow with some tactic. It's all about breaks that help your position get better and better. The pawns are the soul of chess, as Philidor said all the way back in the 18th century. And right here, the only break that matters at the moment is this critical one, b6, because by you playing it, white doesn't have to play b4, b5. White doesn't have to prepare anything. Suddenly, the break has been handed to him. That's why the engine didn't like this move. The break is literally handed to him. Now you can play rook c1, and you try to shut the position down, then knight a5, a4. There's massive pressure on your queen side. So white was just gifted this. Let's just put a fine point. We can say that Fabi played well, did what he had to do to get to this point. It's Magnus's mistake. Chess is a game of mistakes. And it's Magnus's mistake that has landed him in this mess. And this move b6, will he come to regret? I think he's already regretting it. He's probably just sitting there thinking, okay, how do I get out of this? It's time to defend. It's time to find some kind of trickery and chicanery. But he knows for a fact that he has done something wrong and he's in trouble.
Yeah, I agree. It is a game of mistakes, and you're right that b6 is one that you wish you could have back. Ironically, it's a pawn because pawns don't go backwards. I know that from personal experience. So you're right though, Maurice. This is the move you wish you could take back if you're black in this position. But sometimes, you know, we get clarity on things in terms of how the players might have felt as the game goes on, and I do feel like in hindsight, this might have just been a little bit harder for black than we initially realized, because I think this idea of taking this pawn was something we were able to find with the help of our artificially intelligent overlord friends. I think that was a hard thing to do. And if you can't play that in hindsight, Fabi showed exactly what the plan was. Yes, you could say Magnus didn't have to play b6, but even if you don't, white has the bishop pair, white's playing f4. So I think that this position was a little harder for black maybe than we first thought.
If I just may, we didn't find that move. The engine suggested knight takes g3, right?
Mm-hmm.
Back.
No, that was my point, exactly.
Yeah, we didn't really find it. We weren't even able to so to speak get help here. The engine suggested it, and after we played a few moves, we landed in a position where we all were like, "This actually looks pretty good for white. Why would you do this?" Mm-hmm. And the engine was like, "Hey, not so fast. You guys don't know anything. Seriously, sit down before you hurt yourself." But yes, this move, knight takes g3, was a controversial one. We didn't like it that much. We leaned towards white. Magnus apparently didn't like it that much either. So at least we're not totally stupid, because the best player on the planet didn't like the idea either. And instead, he opted for something that he thought made a lot of sense, this move. And it turned out to be a bad move, and he should have played the other way. So you're spot on. This was not as easy as it looked for anybody in the world to play.
Well, Magnus did decide to jump in with a knight, creating a one-move threat. A knight g4 was played, and Fabi responds with getting his queen into the game as well. Queen f3, fighting against that threat, placing the queen on a beautiful square. You know, you're eyeing f5. You're still eyeing e4 in the air. Problems continue for Magnus, and it just feels that now Fabi's playing a standard chess position with all piece coordination, while Magnus is still stuck in the multiverse of freestyle.
I love that point. That's very well said. Fabi looks like he's playing a traditional chess position with the bishop pair and a space advantage. By the way, those things are pretty good. Bishop pair and space advantage. Magnus looks like he's playing a position from the multiverse of Doctor Strange hell, because this is not fun for black. The king is somehow in the middle of the two rooks, and you know the queen came to f3, as you pointed out, to stop the threat of the knight fork. But the position's easy to play. Okay, Magnus plays his queen out to f6, so he's trying to keep pace. Finally, both of the first ladies have joined the fight, no longer on their starting prison position on h1 and NH8, so they're back in it. But we do like white. I still think a simple move that you pointed out before, rook to c1, is coming. Even c takes b6 first. The point is, white does have an opportunity to build up and gain attacking chances on the queen side.
I want to just add to that this last move by Magnus, I think it was really necessary to play, to defend that c6 pawn horizontally right now. And the point is that if you do line up the rook to c1 or take first and attack the c6 pawn, Magnus will have the possibility to retreat with the knight to the square g7, where otherwise it would have blocked the queen on h8. You defend c6 because you never want to put the knight on c7, blocking your own bishop. So that's a smart move by Magnus, and I think a necessary one.
I agree with you. It was a necessary move. It is not something you necessarily want to do, however, is use your queen to defend pesky pawns. Like, why? I'm the big dog of the board, and you have me defending some peon that's just nothing, that's just weakened by my previous pawn move. So that is, I think, dead on. You need to defend the pawn, but it's not something you really want to do, just relegate the queen to this role. So it just still means that white has that edge, but don't overplay edges. My position is better. One of the great jokes I say, if you want to get a laugh, just stand outside of a tournament hall towards the end of the round. You'll see so many people walk out going, I was winning. Yeah, that's nice. And it's real funny. You were winning. This is chess. Nobody's winning anything until the game's over. You can't sleep on advantages. You don't think just because your position is better or maybe even winning that it's enough. And when you're playing Magnus Carlsen, you doubly don't think like that. You make sure that you keep your foot on the gas. You focus on every single possibility. Try to make sure you play the accurate move, because I was winning or I was better suddenly becomes, oh no, it's equal. Oh no, I'm worse. Oh no, I just lost to this guy. And so Fabi still has to find accurate moves in order to win this game.
You know, Danny had to say that when you're playing one of these top grandmasters, you've got to beat them thrice. Once in the opening, once in the middle game, once in the end game. When you're playing Magnus, you have to beat him on every single move, because he gets one opportunity. He's going to be all over you. The advantage just slips away. He's got this incredible ability to not only flawlessly convert better position, but survive the ones that look really bad. And that's what wins you championships. So Fabi's done everything right so far, but he can't just let it go easy right now. You know, you can't just sit on this like Maurice just said. He still has to convert this advantage, and the hardest player to do that against is sitting opposite him.
Yeah, I totally agree. Maurice set the table and you delivered. I agree. We're all sitting here like, all right, as much as we like white, Magnus finding one great move reminds you that he's Magnus. As we said, the queen guards the pawn, slows down white's potential threats over here. And also just getting out of the way. You mentioned knight g7, Tanya, as a defensive resource in case you need to defend the pawn. But knight g7 is a plan anyway, right? To bring the knight there, maybe come into the f5 square. Again, because the queen is no longer being blocked on h8, the queen on f6 not only does the job, as you said, but immediately prepares a plan of knight g7, knight f5. And with Fabi playing rook c1, maybe Magnus goes for knight g7 now, Maurice?
Big moment, by the way. One thing you don't like in chess sometimes is choice. Like most of the time, like, no, I'd like to have this move or that move or that move. Levon Aronian once told me, and it blew my mind when he said it. He says, we strong players, we don't like to have 6 different moves. There's too many moves to be thinking about. Like, just give me a position where there's one good move. And if it's, I don't care how hard it is, if it's only the one good move, we're going to find it. But when you start having options, I could do this, I could do that, I could do that. Which one's better than what? Then you start thinking about which one's the best, and it start burning clock time. Here, white had those 2 options. I believe you mentioned, Tanya, taking on b6, maybe playing rook c1. Which one is better? You just want to have flow. You don't want to parse the differences between this grammatical term and that one. No, I just want to make a simple move. And Fabi spent some time finally said, what am I doing? I'm just going to play the move rook c1. That's what I wanted to do. And by the way, let's pay attention to the clock. You guys mentioned you have to beat him 3 times or beat strong players 3 times. So there's the moves, the opening, you said this, Tanya, opening, middle game, and end game. You have to beat them also on the clock as well. You want to keep that edge because you may have a much better position, but if you only got 2 minutes left, good luck converting your advantage. But Fabi's keeping an edge on the clock too. So he's got it all lined up for the comeback. Will he pull it off? Okay, only time will tell.
I like his chances a lot. I know that we've reminded everybody, don't go anywhere, even if white's better. It's Magnus Carlsen sitting on the other side of the table. But I mean, white has the bishop pair here. The biggest weakness on the board is a pawn that's on a light square, which again is the one bishop that black lacks. The long-term features of this position, every single one of them favors white. And when you take back on c5, which I'm assuming he will take with the knight, although
maybe you can take with the pawn and keep the knight a5 idea on the agenda. Perhaps that's why Fabi's thinking. But anything that happens on the queen side, once we have clarity, leaves white with these ideas you've already mentioned. And I just have a hard time believing that Fabiano Caruana makes a blunder, makes a slip. There's a reason he's the guy that took Magnus the distance, didn't lose to him in the 2018 World Championship. This is the kind of game that requires accuracy. You're a technician. You calculate well. There's maybe one guy in the world who's as good at doing those three things as Magnus Carlsen, and it's Fabiano.
Yeah, and they played a match together. Magnus didn't win a single classical game in that one. That went to the wire as well, and this is freestyle, right? So all of that from move one. You know, a very interesting point you made. We're not even sure what to take with. And I would be so tempted to take it with the d4 pawn, but there is a problem in this position because yes, you want your bishop on c3. I see everything that you want. But perhaps why Fabi doesn't go for that is because of knight to e5. Suddenly taking advantage of that pin. And you can see this position now is, you know, the problems are past you. Well, not even if you don't walk into that, you fall back with the queen. Everything's good. You take that bishop on d3. And I think Fabi made the right decision. You want the c line open. You know, the bishop on d2 has got a nice square on a5. And look at that. Magnus immediately lashes out.
You gotta love it. It's all about that break. You gotta love it. The reason for the queen move is now revealed. Magnus was even deeper than we recognized. Magnus realized that his queen on f6 was actually pinning the f pawn to the queen on f4, and he saw the potential of exploiting this possibility with this move e5, breaking open the game. Just an absolute boss of a concept to put that queen on f6. That's, you know, you try to guess your opponent's moves, and when they're playing moves like this where you what I thought you were trying to defend, but you were actually trying to attack. That's just boss chess right there.
Final boss, right?
Final boss.
I mean, this is what we were talking about. You got to beat him on every single move. Give him one chance and he's out of any troubles. And e5 is exactly that. Now the dynamics change. Even if it's advantage white, Fabi has to reset his mind because Magnus has made an incredibly active move. You take that pawn with the d pawn, the knight. Actually, the idea that we were discussing in the other line. Knight takes pawn comes on the board. And, you know, suddenly you've got this bishop that's playing as well. I think this looks... It still gives advantage to white. And I'm just wondering that if that's because you've got bishop c3, bishop b4 lined up, and things could look tricky here. And, you know, Danny, I just realized as I say that, I think the problem is not knight takes pawn, but the counterintuitive bishop takes pawn. Because let's not forget the b2 weakness. Suddenly the rook from d8 comes to b8, and you're looking at all kinds of ideas.
Yeah, I think bishop takes pawn is critical. As much as knight takes is cute, and we love forking the queen and bishop, that's actually not a position you want as black, as we saw there. Okay, Fabi has taken the pawn, so we're going to quickly see what Magnus's idea was. I'm going to assume he's going to take with the bishop, but I do want to say, as much as e5 was great, and again, it's Magnus Carlsen doing final boss things, the position is still in white's control because I'm not just looking at the eval bar. I'm looking at the fact that when the smoke clears, right, we've got some tactics here. We're in the middle of the gunfight right now, but when the smoke clears, black has the biggest weakness on c6. He also has the weak pawn on a7. Fabiano Caruana is as good as it gets, along with Magnus, at converting on these advantages. So I think Fabi just doesn't want this to get out of control and then get the rooks doubled on the c-file, find a way to keep the pressure. Note that black still hasn't fully coordinated, and that's a tempo. It's only one tempo, but it's a move you need at some point to get coordinated. So I'm still in camp Armageddon here.
My engine is saying only move e5. Only move. Like, you had to play that move. And what does it do? It changes the character of the position. A second ago, the guy had a foot on your face. You're not going anywhere. Don't try to get up. You're just frozen. You can't just sit there and let him pile the pressure on the c6 pawn. So what do? You change the entire character, the nature of the position. You make it go hog wild. If you're not losing right away, then you might as well imbalance the situation and make him think, make him wonder how he's going to keep control. Now, Fabi knows all this stuff. He's not unused to players trying to get out of binds in the position. So it's not as though he's going to scare anyone. Magnus plays e5. Yeah, it might scare us. Like, oh no, I didn't see that tactic and the pin and all that stuff, and I got to consider it. And Fabi says, yeah, that's just the basic idea we 2800s do, and I know Magnus just did it, but I'm not going to be intimidated. So let me just go about my business and continue to convert what I do have, which is an advantage in pawn structure and not so much space anymore, but at least the pawn structure, because he's got the 2 pawn islands versus black's 3.
I think it's absolutely essential for Magnus to take it with the bishop, and he does it. He navigates the right trade here, because allowing Fabi to activate that dark squared bishop one move away from either c3 or b4 would have been absolute disaster. You very nicely pointed out, Danny, that for Magnus, he needs that one move to connect the two rooks. He's playing down a rook right now. Rook g8 not doing anything. Meanwhile, the rook from g1 can slide over to c1 and put some real threats on the position. For Magnus, left side is out of the question for the king. You have to eventually get yourself on the king side, you know, swap the rook and the king and get it there. But that's a move away. Right now, the big question is, does Fabi have the time to go on the offense, or is bishop takes pawn too much of a threat?
It's a big question, and I think that, you know, you look at rook c2. I would even consider bishop c1, although I hate that because it takes away the square that I want my rook on. But I wanted to point out bishop c1, as slow as it is, you do still have plans. Ultimately, you can slow jam this position when you're in control of the long-term positional weaknesses. But I want to go to rook gc1 because I was thinking there's no way you could do it. But because you suggested, I was like, wait, can you actually go for this?
It's terrifying,
and
right?
Get all in on the idea that things are going to get crazy.
The bar doesn't hate it.
It doesn't hate it.
The wild tactic, though, in the move knight to e5 is still back potential on the board.
Wow.
Like, what the heck is that about?
And there's everything hanging. Yeah, rook takes queen, knight takes queen, king takes bishop, knight takes bishop.
What's funny is at the end of this endgame, like
rook c7.
what
even is
what's
going
on here, right? This is like if Fabiano calculates this.
Oh, that's nice. You just go shot castle, a move that we completely forgot about.
Oh my God, you castle to defend.
And then bishop takes pawn, pawn takes bishop, rook takes pawn, and this is how this will end, folks, in a perpetual.
It ain't ending like this. Forget it. No,
that's hilarious. Hilarious. But okay, so that just shows you, for the fans watching, what these players might be thinking about right now, just how absolutely crazy this position is, and that we might be in one of the most critical moments of the game. Because again, it's easy for us as commentators. We have the help of the engine. Don't be surprised if these are the kind of moments where a player makes a move and all of a sudden you see that eval shoot up, because they are calculating this on their own, and this is intense.
I want to make a point as we go back just quickly. This moment was highly critical in the game. This exact position. Remember, we said you have a choice, and if you have time, you think about that choice. In this position here, what's funny is that the engine, when it first saw this position, thought that rook c1 was the best move. It gave that as like, don't think about it, just play rook c1, even though you have c takes b6. But what happens with engines sometimes is as things start to play out on the board, they learn what should have happened before. And by making a couple of moves after rook c1 and the trade and the e5 break, the engine realizes, oh, wait a minute, after seeing all this and my event horizon gets deeper and deeper, this line is actually too good for white. So I'm going to keep, for black, I mean. So I'm going to keep that data. I'm going to retroactively go back to the moment when you could have played c takes b6, and I'm going to upgrade that move to being the #1 move in the position. It's like a little bit of a cheat. Like, wait a minute, you said it was rook c1, and now you want to change your mind and say it's cb6, and say, yeah, I am, because you gave me more data. And the data is that analysis. Right here, c takes b6 would not have allowed this e5 shot. It's rook c1 that allowed it, because now, as we now know, excuse me, let me go back one move. As we now know, it allows for this e5 break to come about. So rook c1 was actually an inferior choice for black, and now the game has exploded along ways that Fabi really didn't want to have happen. He would have rather keep control of this position. I'm going to point out also, by the way, that the engine gives a line that is completely ridiculous. Rook to c2 as the best move against rook to b8, bishop to c1 as the best move. Guys, if we start having to play moves like this, we feel like we lost control of the position. Like, this is not what I wanted to do, is start backing up and defending my b2 pawn, when a second ago, it was all about me ripping up this pawn in my sleep. Like, I was just going to take it. And now you have me playing these moves and saying, no, 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 you're still better. Really? I'm not that happy having to play these kind of defensive moves in order to prove any real advantage.
What's interesting is it's either that or it's you know, let's bring the house on the C file, right? Because I agree, that's not a thing that feels good to start having to retreat. But this position, especially when we're looking at this line with 95, I mean, that's something that is a mess to calculate. So I do think, again, if Fabi goes for rook c2 or bishop c1 first, as we were saying, white does have these long-term advantages of these weak pawns. So, but the question is, will Fabi calculate and try to go for something more concrete? He's knee-deep in variation town right now.
And he needs to take this time, because this is really the moment, right? It's kind of hard when you're playing with white to walk into these ideas. You know, you allow the black rook to go to b8 after bishop c1 or rook c2, and then Magnus gets the time to go short castle and get the other rook into the game as well. And it's not so clear where you're fighting for the advantage. But on the other hand, the only other move that makes sense is this crazy long line that we saw. But that's a straightforward line, right? They always say in chess, you can calculate far ahead as long as it's a linear tree that you're looking at. This idea of rook c1, bishop takes pawn, rook takes pawn, ending in that crazy draw that we just saw, it's just not good enough for Fabi. He needs to keep the what is as messy as possible. We still don't have a move, and Maurice?
Yeah, not only don't we have a move, look at the clock times. Let's put the clock back on the board, producer. The clock times. Remember when you had a healthy time advantage? Remember you could lean on the clock to say, yeah, I'm beating you on the board and on the clock? Well, that has changed because of that move, e5, that he broke out. He did not control the position enough. And now we're seeing that rook c1, ultra natural. We all would have played rook c1. Let's just admit it. That taking on b6 was actually better. And now the game has dramatically changed. If he's got to play moves like bishop c1 or rook c2, all that's just junk in this position. And by the way, I want to point out a spectacular variation that the freakish engine just pointed out. The move bishop c1 is actually not that good because of a weird idea. And I mean weird. The move bishop to d4, exploiting the pieces along this diagonal. What is that? If you take, queen takes, and suddenly your rooks are disconnected, and black's the one who's in charge here, even though there might be shots like f5 and craziness. And if you move your rook after bishop to d4 or rook here, the bishop takes on a new diagonal. Thank you very much. I'm eyeballing this pawn. Who has a weakness now? And black is perfectly fine. So suddenly, black has these amazing tactical opportunities. You know, I talk about Hikaru Nakamura like this. I call him Hydra. The mythical monster, you chop one head off and two show up. Magnus is like Hydra squared. Like, what? There's so many, like, how are you going to kill this guy? I got to kill him, and he's just bringing all this at you. And I'm sure Fabi, when he went into this position thinking that I got this under control, he's now sitting there going, what the heck? How did this happen? My advantage has slipped away in a way that just was going to be on easy street. Now it's anything but.
I just want to add that falling into bishop c1 and bishop d4 is so easy. Bishop d4 is such an easy miss in this position. Fabi has three choices, right? Rook c2, bishop c1, or the other rook to c1.
You don't like choices either, by the way, we mentioned.
And Fabi made a wrong one earlier, right? Taking pawn takes pawn. If he plays bishop c1, bishop d4, and the table's completely turned, we're talking about a potential Magnus advantage then.
Look at the tables have turned even further on the heart rate here, which again is just crazy that Magnus Carlsen's heartbeat, if possible, continues to get lower, his stress level, staying with a big smiley face, whatever that emote is. Fabi, not so much. But again, the chess on the board, still okay for him, even though it's critical for sure. He has to find the right continuation here, as Maurice pointed out. No longer up on the clock, which doesn't feel good psychologically. And we see there probably
down 3 minutes on the clock.
If bishop c1, bishop d4 isn't great for white, that leaves us with rook c2 and rook to c1. What are our predictions? What is Fabi going for right now? What do you think he's going to play?
I think rook to c2 will, I mishighlighted there. Rook to c2 I think will be the move he goes for the longer he thinks, because as you're calculating those force variations, you either find something you're happy with, or often you end up settling on a safe move. This is like a human nature thing that happens, and we're gonna watch right now because
it's a big moment.
Body language leaning a little bit like I'm gonna move. Oh, not yet, but here he comes.
You don't want to move.
Rook c1 has a forced sequence of moves, right, which seems to be working out in black's favor because of that castle at the end of the variation.
That castle's is crazy, by the way. I mean, that's like the move Maurice pointed out, and it's critical because never forget, you can solve your problems in chess 960 in freestyle with just one move. And everything is back to normal.
Easiest to forget in that line, Maurice.
Yes, that is a part of a chess puzzle, actually, in chess.
He goes for it, by the way, we might be seeing it.
You play rook c1, yeah. No, you don't. You didn't want to play any of the other moves. I was going to say, you had all these choices. You did not want to play any of the other moves. Bishop to c1 or rook c2 say, I was in control, large in charge, but you got me backing up. I don't want to back up. I'm supposed to keep the energy alive, the initiative alive, and it is possible. Fabi and I played a little bit of a mini match against my co-host Tanya here and Magnus Carlsen. And in our game, he actually forgot that black could not castle kingside. And he made a move that I was like, what do you do that for? He said, oh, expletive. He can't castle kingside anymore. Well, guess what? He might have forgotten that black can castle kingside here, because that line with castles comes at the very end of this forcing variation and gives black the game, or gives black at least a fine position where we might only see a repetition.
I'm going to point out, though, I think the question mark move is a little overly critical by our lovely analysis. Sometimes when the heat is turned up, that algorithm I'll just speak to a little bit because people often wonder, you would never give a question mark to a move that's like 0.2 to players lower than 1800. But at a high level, we tweak the algorithm to get a little bit less forgiving, because obviously mistakes at this level aren't as big of blunders. But I still feel like that's a little bit too harsh. I think that white is going to maintain an edge here with rook to c1. The question is whether we're going to get that long forcing line, where, as Maurice said, we might see that Fabi forgot castles. Go ahead.
No, I'm really glad that you said that, because it's so easy to get critical of that cross that we see come on. But rook c1, not only a human approach, it still keeps the edge, but there is this forced sequence of moves, right? Otherwise, rook takes pawn is a massive threat. White has got ideas now of the other rook stepping up to c2, so just keeping everything defended, and a beautiful rook planted on c5. Magnus is calculating, and I think we should deep dive into that line.
Let's look at that line, because I think that we saw the brilliant idea that castle solves all the problems.
And I don't think Fabi missed knight e5, because this has been in the air for the last couple of moves, you know, this pattern with the pin.
I agree. I think there's a decent chance, and Fabi is so good at these types of positions. Maurice mentioned Hikaru. I remember talking to Hikaru about what does Fabi do better than anybody. He said it's the types of positions where you have a storm and there's one clear line that gets the edge. Fabi tends to handle those positions better than anybody, the ones that really require technical calculation, and that's high praise from a guy like Hikaru. And so I think that probably Fabi has seen this. The question is, does he have something better than rook c7? Because even if you see it, it may not matter if there's nothing better than the line that, as we already pointed out, is solved with castles. So go ahead, Maurice. What do you think?
Well, it's not necessarily that anything's better than rook c7, actually. It's the line, is there anything better is there anything after rook c7? So here, you get this position, you get this, you get this, you get this, you get this, you get rook c7, you get funky castles. And here, you realize, okay, I didn't get anything here, but guess what? I still have 2 pawn islands. You have 3. That means something. I have a rook on the 7th at the moment. I have a bishop over your knight. That tends to be an edge, as Bobby Fischer often showed. And maybe I just play rook a6. You do have that pawn sitting there. And what are you doing? You're not exactly hitting anything in my camp. Yes, you can play this move. I can play here. And now this is the real line to look at. After knight here, this pawn is potentially hanging. And the engine gives the wild e4 as a move, preparing after takes with the bishop on c4. And I think if we all look at this one now, we're like, I'm kind of liking white. All of a sudden, rook g6 check is a threat, in addition to bishop takes on f7. And suddenly, the game is back in business. So it doesn't mean just because you put your foot up, you let your foot off the gas and gave your opponent an opportunity that maybe you should have done something more accurate or whatever. I don't want to listen to you. You can still be practical. You can still keep whatever flow. And this is a position to play. Will Magnus be able to defend it? It's Magnus, so odds are pretty decent. But Fabi still has some chances here. Let's not just throw out the position entirely.
No, it's Magnus, it's an endgame, so he's always going to have a chance to defend it and even maybe sometimes turn it around. But it's the kind of position, you know, if the take does happen, Tani.
I'd like to get your take on this position, Tanya, if you don't mind.
I already told you, after all that take, it looks pretty good to me.
Yeah.
For white still, as Maurice was talking about. But Danny, I think the point is that the end that we saw in all of that, it looks like a game for 2 results, right? Mm-hmm. With the rook activity that Fabi is going to end up with all the threats that you pointed out, and the fact that Magnus hasn't gone into this forcing sequence of moves, because rook c8 is not a happy move to make. That's not a move that you want to play. There might even be immediate tactics on the board, but even if there are not, it's not what he's looking at. He's trying to evaluate what happens at the very end of that line.
Yep. No, I agree. I'm just going to
show he's not happy with it.
Rook to c8. we just play rook to c2 maybe. Maybe there's better moves, but I
This is good enough.
just the simplest thing to point out
yeah.
that we no longer we're dealing with the dysfunction of our rook not being in the game, of those weird tactics of bishop d4. So even if there's something better, I agree. Magnus does not want to play this move. So he is deep in this variation, trying to see whether he believes there's enough to hold on to this endgame. But you said it, Maurice nodded along over there. I agree. This is a 2-result position, and in chess terms, for those tuning in, that means only white can win. White can win. Maybe it's a draw, but there's no way black is winning. So Magnus is not going to be happy going for a line like this.
I point out that it was Tanya who said it was a 2-result position, and I think she's absolutely right to bring the term up right at this moment. If you have, I might draw. It might be a draw, but I've got like 30% chance of winning. You have 0. Well, let's go down that line. Let's see what it looks like. Magnus wins those even when it's like 50-50 looking, or 51-49, and he wins those games. So if Fabi can get a position like this one on the screen and says, you're not playing for a win, guess who is? Then we've got what you want. And Magnus does not want to put that on the board. He knows how to win those like anybody. And I'll just make this second and final point. Magnus didn't go into this position to get some wimpy endgame where he's defending. He got hog wild. Bring your rook back. Give me that bishop d4 tactic. If you play bishop c1, I get a rook b8 against your king. And then Fabi goes, not so fast. Let's go into something quiet where you have no counterplay. I'm the one who's playing for something. This is a world-class practical move, even if the other line with rook c2 was technically better, but you're playing human against human, and practicality increases in that setting. What's going to bother your opponent the most? And I guarantee you that endgame we just put on the board with the rook to a6 bothers Magnus much more than if you had played wild and kept more pieces on the board.
And perhaps that's the reason, right, why Magnus is taking this long think and he's not going into this, because it's the kind of position where you're just suffering. Suffering without really any hope for yourself to convert it. He's desperately trying that even if it means objectively it's worse than the endgame he has to face, but at least to have pieces on the board, to not liquidate into this, miserable position. Let's just be honest. If Magnus was white and this endgame was to happen, most of us would be like, okay, he's taking this home.
It's over.
This is over.
And look at Magnus getting a little nervous there. He shifted his eyes over to the clock. I just want to point out again that Fabiano's time advantage was at one point almost 10 minutes. He was then down a few minutes. He's now back by more than 5 minutes up on the clock. And it is indicative, right? Obviously, we know the players are great, so sometimes our job as commentators is to point out any little edge that is shifting, and Fabiano's advantage may not just be on the board, but off the board. And if Magnus gets in time pressure, it's just going to make it even harder to hold. But okay, real quick, let's hold the phone. Magnus is obviously calculating to see how he feels about this position. But remember, he only needs a draw to win the match. He won yesterday on the yacht. Shout out to the boat that we left behind, right? We're on stable ground now. But I think he's also just evaluating, okay, that may be bad, it may be miserable, but I've played and defended worse positions before. How bad do I feel? Maybe he goes for it under the thought that he can try to get a rook ending or something. So I think he's calculating not just whether he wants to stay in the position now, but as you said, Tanya, he's visualizing that position 10 moves down the road to be like, is there any chance for me to hold that? Because all I need is the half point.
It's not just that, though. It's what are my options? Is there another move? What do I do? The guy's threatening rook takes c6. Do I stop and play the really anemic looking rook c8, which just doesn't even work here? Do I play something like rook to b8, which the engine is pointing out, b3, and oh, that's gone. No more bishop takes b2. And we're only looking at your c6 weakness all of a sudden. Does he have a choice? And he's got to be looking at that choice, potential choices that, can I get anything? Are there any kind of trickery here that I can play for? Is there just anything but my pawn is hanging and I don't get to do anything? So he might be actually forced into this line after looking at everything else. And that's, I think, what he's spending his time on, because you don't want to play some garbage line that gives white exactly what he wanted. You know, the worst thing you could do in chess is your opponent, you think you make an attacking move, like you're about to take on b2, and your opponent goes, you can do that if you want to. Like, you're supposed to defend the pawn. You say, no, you could take it. Go ahead. I got something for you. Go ahead. I dare you. That's what Fabi has done. He's played very practically, saying that final position I feel good about. Magnus actually feels good about it for white as well. And he knows better than any of us that that's a position he'll be defending. And does he really want to? He will only accept it if there's nothing else he finds to do.
He's desperately trying to find something else. And you know, when it rains, it pours, and it's pouring problems for him. Because after this line that Maurice pointed out with rook b8, b3, you can't even defend that c6 pawn laterally with rook to b6, because the bishop from d2 then slides over to a5, and then you've got no squares to really hide.
Yeah,
and I don't know.
Time is telling
ticking
here. Time is telling, right? He's thinking.
When
because...
we were playing against Maurice and Fabi, and their time was ticking, Magnus said it, tick-tock. It's tick-tock on him right now.
By the way, that trash talk that was happening by Magnus in the middle of the game, we haven't unpacked that yet. That was really
Maurice and I have a deal going on. We can't break it.
I don't think Fabi's going to say tick-tock to Magnus.
I got no problems with it. I told you, I'm actually very happy for you that you won, Tanya, because I know if you had lost,
but seriously,
you never would have survived.
I'm just happy, Maurice, that we made it look so smooth.
I don't think Fabi's going to say TikTok here.
We will get. I'll get my revenge at another time. But let me tell you, at this moment, Magnus is feeling anything but like this is a smooth position, because he is seeing this and saying, "Yo, I'm a little bit of trouble here. I'm a little bit of trouble."
Well, all right, you guys couldn't let it go. You keep talking about this might be our last night or our last opportunity tonight to just give people a highlight in case they miss it. So we're going to steal 90 seconds and actually just give you a recap of what happened that night and all this trash talk that is still going down here between Tanya and Maurice. Oh, wait.
The evening before the summit, there was already a spectacular exhibition fight in the head-in-hand format. Above the rooftops of Singapore at the Swiss Hotel de Stamford, Magnus Carlsen in the team with Tanya Sachev against Fabiano Caruana and Maurice Ashley, with a win for Sachev and Magnus Carlsen.
It's been a great event, and I'm looking forward to enjoying not only playing but also socializing. It's going to be fantastic. We're going to have 5 amazing tournaments with the best players in the world in the format that I want to play. So cannot get much better than that.
An impressive start to the Freestyle Chess Summit in Singapore.
I like the atmosphere. I'm really looking forward to the tour very much. I think it'll be exciting, it'll be very new, and the organization is top level. I'm really looking forward to all the tournaments, and I hope that I'll do well.
1,000 times better than I was imagining and dreaming. It's amazing. It's really fantastic, and it's like it's a dream. It's amazing.
Freestyle chess, more creativity, more excitement, more chess like you've never seen before.
That was a great night, and we're getting some great action just as we left. Moves on the board. Maurice and I will continue our trash talking later, but right now, this is what we were looking at, Danny. And I think we're going to reach that endgame because knight e5 forces the trades of the queen. It's a fork on c6 and f3. Why is Fabi taking time? Is there an alternative that we're missing to rook takes queen?
I don't know, but you're right that right as we threw to that recap, the moves did start coming in. Although, fortunately for the viewers, this is exactly what we've been now talking about for almost 20 minutes. And so we anticipated this would happen. The question is, as Tanya's asking, other than rook takes f6, is there anything else? The only other forcing move, which, by the way, it has to be a forcing move because your queen and rook are being forked right now. That's why you have to capture, is bishop to b4 check. Right. And what's funny about that move is that it does at least take away black's right to castle. And if we just go down the same forcing line of takes and takes, now your bishop isn't hanging. And there's a question.
But the rook is.
What?
The rook is.
But the rook is. So what's the move? Is it rook here to defend?
The bishop on b2. I think this actually helps black a lot. This check would solve a lot of Magnus's problems.
I agree now. So I think that the answer is maybe Fabi's just double checking variations because this check doesn't seem to do anything but help black. Rook takes f6 is likely the move we're going to see. And will Fabiano have enough to win and force this thing into Armageddon?
There is a line in that bishop b4 check that he's not going to go for. But it is possible. It is theoretically possible anyway for him to play the line. And again, you don't want to have choices. It's annoying when you have a choice and he's looking at it because it does exist. This move, bishop to b4 check, king moves, rook takes on f6. And now after knight takes, as you mentioned, the rook's hanging. You can clean up the trash there and then take here. You have two bishops oh, sorry, before taking on b2, it's better to throw in this check and force the king to move and now take on b2. And you say, I have the two bishops, I'm down in exchange for a pawn, but there's some weakness here, but the two bishops isn't enough. And you're going to evaluate and eventually say, this is not better than the other line that I could play for with rook a6.
Before you change the position, just want to point out a little mating threat in after king b2. Rook there's king f6.
I was looking at the same thing. I was also trying to fantasize whether I could trap the knight over there with bishop e2, but once it gets to h2, it gets back. So the eval bar is always right. That's why it's evil. Black would have been fine there, as Maurice pointed out, and I think he doesn't want it. So indeed, Fabi, whether he calculated the variations we just showed or not, either way, he's going for the initial lines that we've now been analyzing, and the move king takes b2 will likely be next.
Because the rook's hanging, the bishop's hanging.
Yeah, unless you're going back for bishop b4 check, which by the way you could still do, but it's the same problem. So I think we're going to get king takes b2 to have it on the analysis board here while we wait for Fabi.
Only move.
Knight takes d2, and again rook c7. You could also play rook a6 first. We could just point that out. It is possible.
But rook c7 is screaming to be played. It's really the move
It is
you
going to
want
be, but
to
then
make.
we scream about the rules of freestyle and black castles and solves the problem. So I think you could do both. I think you could play rook a6.
No, actually, rook a6 is a bad move because
Okay, let's show why.
There's a check. If you take and you play rook a6 now, your king loses the choice that it had a second ago. The king wants to go to the center of the board. If you put your king on c3 now, you block your rook from c1 from being active. So you simply lose a tempo in this line versus the other line. So here, actually now the engine is saying it's for even another purpose, to move rook to e8 because you're not hitting with tempo. Okay, my engine's being really fickle and saying your move is possible.
The more it thinks, the more it says it's okay, I guess.
That rook a6 is a move. It's not as good as rook c7, but that rook a6 is a move. And so scratch everything I just said.
I'm going to be surprised if we see rook a6 on the board. I just want to say, Danny, 10 out of 10 times you play rook c7 in this position.
100%.
And then you think.
100%. I was just pointing out that Fabi is in control. We've established it's going to be a two-result game. But will it be enough? We're going to find out.
This is the big question.
He has to win. Remember, everybody, Magnus is up a game in the match, so it's win or go home, literally, for Fabi in Singapore here.
But in this position, only king takes b2 should be played, right?
It's only...
I don't think he's calculating.
Is he calculating the next move?
I would think that he's looking ahead right now because I really don't see an alternative. He looks a bit stressed, no?
Something's up.
Did you see that?
Something's up. King takes b2. If king takes b2, what's the biggie?
He said something to himself there.
Yeah, and he just shut his eyes for a few moments. It was as if he's trying to get some clarity. And you're right, Maurice. Yes, even if you're looking ahead, the obvious move, you make that first. And let Magnus think, let Magnus decide. But he keeps thinking.
Something's bugging him. Is it rook b8 check now without taking the bishop? It doesn't seem right.
But then you just go king c2 and bishop c3.
C2 and you're set. So that's not it. So what? The only other way is bishop b4 check, which I really hope he does not play. Yeah. But again, sometimes you're too good for yourself. Like you're just too good. We simple folks, we just take on b2, we play rook c7, and we keep it moving. Fabi's trying to parse the possibilities here, and some kind of ghost has gotten in his brain, and it's trickled all the way down to his heart, because we got a heart rate that's pumping right now in this position.
He was at 130, then it went back to 90 once the pieces got traded, and now again it's going up. By the way, stress level at medium, and I was told that's determined by the time between the beats and the variation of that. So there's clearly more of that happening inside Fabi right now. Magnus is consistent, regardless of what's going on. Stress level low, heart rate at 70, and Fabi still hasn't made his decision. This is surprising.
Yeah, the time on the clock is now back to even. Remember, Fabi was up by almost 6 or almost 7 minutes there at one point. Fabi had 24, and Magnus got down to 17. So the heart rate's going up and the clock is going down, and that's a bad sign.
Why this moment? What is he thinking about? What are the alternatives? It has to be between king takes bishop and bishop b4 check. There is no third move right now.
Yeah, again, these guys manage their time usually well. They're trying to think ahead and use the clock as a weapon, but this is just not great clock management when the choices seem to be very, very limited, and probably you can't solve all your problems, so you might as well make a move.
Is it possible?
What happened?
I'm just gonna put it out there, and I refuse to believe that it's true. Is it possible that he forgot about castles?
That is totally possible.
That we are taking it for granted that he sees castles and rook a6, and we're just going down that line because we see castles and rook a6. We know the three of us have been reminding each other that castles is playable. Is it possible that he had actually thought that castles was not playable, and now it's dawned on him like, oh, wait a minute, dude can still castle, and if he does, I don't have the completely crushing position that I thought I did. I'm just hoping that's not what happened, but it's such a compelling explanation for why he hasn't taken on b2 already. Because now he wants to play bishop b4 like he did in the game yesterday where he played queen h4 and stopped castling. Remember that? It was a bad moment. Now he might think, let me play bishop b4 and go into some exchange down position. Just take on b2, Fabi. Come on. Like, even if you forget about castles, you still got something in the position.
I think that's exactly what's happened, but this is what we spoke about earlier, right? That down the line, it's so easy for that to skip your mind. To just remember that this is freestyle chess, and in this position, black can castle by just swapping the king and the rook next to each other.
No, I mean, it's a good point, because again, there's no way Fabiano doesn't realize black can't castle or can castle here, but this line started all the way back here, right? And this is possible that when he entered this line several moves earlier, that at that point he was taking for granted the rules of freestyle and or just forgot. And so now that he's arrived here, the clock management explains it. By the way, speaking of clock management, he's now down 2 minutes. He was up 6 minutes just a moment ago. And so this is a big turnaround. You see his eyes right there. He just peeked over at the clock. He knows he needs to speed up, but he's got to be nervous.
But this is uncharacteristics of these top guys, right? Because we've seen them so many times handle these situations. When something unexpected happens, they have this ability to just pull themselves back and get a grip of everything. Yes, you see short castle is possible, but you also don't have an option here.
You don't have an option. You got to move. And so
you play bishop b4, you're only helping Magnus right now, putting his king in a better square, connecting the rooks.
But listen, that's one thing, but when you are shocked to your foundation, and it looks like he has finally captured and played rook c7, which we would have expected. But reversals, he's only human. He may be the third highest rated player in the history of chess, but he is only human as well. And when a reversal like this happens, you still have to collect your bearings. And he did do so, and he did find the move rook c7. But if he had forgotten about it, and suddenly we're sitting here going up, but he's going, are you kidding me? I was crushing the guy. Do you know if you can't castle in this position, it's +2. The game is over. It's done. You're sitting there thinking, I got you, baby. It's over. And then you go, what? I forgot. This is not +2 anymore. Do I have an advantage? What did I do? Should I have gone into this line? Your heart rate starts to go up. Now you got to reset.
Well, look at that.
He's done his job to reset, and now he's actually gotten from the board. He played f5 afterwards. Pretty quickly, by the way, hastily so.
But I think he must have been calculating it, right? He was managing his time, or, obviously we were critical, and I think rightfully so, because, he went from 6 minutes up to 2 minutes down. But at least now he's making up for it and showing that he was calculating something. Even if he missed castles, that just means he knows he has to mix it up. So f5 is a move that is like, my moment may be small, but it's still here, and I'm going to play a move to try to confuse Magnus while I still have a chance.
He's up to 140 on his heart rate. That's the highest that's gone for Fabi.
But apparently his stress level's higher or better. I don't know. He's now got a big smiley
He's smiling, but f5, really interesting that the blue arrow marks that this is the only move that Magnus has to keep the balance.
Yeah.
He needs to bring the knight to the center of the board, and he needs to calculate that because there are pawns hanging all across, and perhaps, Maurice, you'll show us the path. But knight e4 is really the only way for Magnus ahead. Yeah. Otherwise, Fabi will be up with a massive advantage. You don't want to break your pawn structure, pawn formation on the king side.
Not only that, I want to show that knight e4 is the move we have the luxury of seeing with the engine helpful blue arrow and seeing the eval bar. But look at the line. It requires you to go for an endgame where you're entering a rook ending that you're down.
King g7. You need to see that move.
This is okay. Magnus Carlsen does things like this all the time, right? But this is not a thing that's that exciting to go for in a rook ending. I mean, you're having to calculate whether you can hold this. You're having to visualize. Do you think you have a defensive setup? A7 is hanging. This is not an easy position to go for. And I want to point that out because I think depending on what's about to happen and the drama we're going to have on the board, it might be, oh my God, this is the moment where Magnus blundered, whatever. But this is objectively a very difficult spot that Fabiano just put him in.
Okay, 100% you're right. 100% you're right. 100% it won't matter. He's going for that rook ending. 100%. He's got nothing else to do, and that's what top players do. When you have an advantage against them, you think you have a mate? No, you have a rook ending coming. That's what's coming.
Yeah.
They're gonna flip that mating attack that you got, change it around so that you have to show your technique. And Magnus is in that Levant Aronian situation. What else are you gonna do? You have to go for this. There's nothing else. You're being blasted. And Fabi played this move at F5, looking for initiative, looking for energy, because he thought he was winning back, but when castles wasn't possible. At least that's what we're guessing. We could be completely wrong. It's happened before that we were wrong, but we won't talk about those times. But this right now, yes, it is definitely the case that he's trying to keep a massive advantage. And there was 100% he was going to play knight e4. No question about it. 100% he sees king g7. No question about it. He's going into the rook ending because, as one grandmaster famously said, I believe
he doesn't.
Wait a second.
Maurice, he doesn't play king g7. He's given a check.
Given a check, but he's going to give away the f pawn. That's what he's doing. He's going to give away
same
the
idea,
f pawn.
I guess.
The f pawn's not going anywhere, and he's going to get his counterplay in the ending where all rook endings are drawn. Now, of course, that's not true, but it's said somewhat tongue-in-cheek. It's very difficult to convert rook endings, and this one does look difficult because white has weaknesses too.
What's funny is obviously the computer went for the king g7 line, and I was admittedly, remember, I was just sort of displaying the idea to kind of highlight how critical the moment was. But now that rook d2 is on the board, it's almost a Magnus move improving on an engine. I'm like, was that actually a better variation of getting the same idea? Because just to show everybody, if you come up to c3, this rook's going to check on d3 and just take e3, because as we said, black is already ready to give up that f7 pawn. So this might be the fastest path to a draw. And does anybody get excited about playing the move king to b1? Like, no. So again, I was showing king g7 as a critical point, but the truth is Magnus may have just improved on that initially thought to be best engine line with this little intermezzo check here.
And how quickly did he just make that move? It's amazing how he finds these resources. Now, I want to come back to that point of f5, right? It looked really dangerous when Fabi played it, and he rushed through it. Which means that he was actually calculating when he was spending all that time before he took that bishop on b2. And perhaps he just rushed through it a bit too quickly.
Yeah.
Because it looks like once the knight and bishop, the biggest imbalance in the position, the minors, are off the board, and you don't have a direct way to advantage, you've liquidated the position too much.
Yeah.
That is exactly
well, remember
right.
though, I want to highlight, and then I'll throw it back to Maurice, because Maurice was the one who first showed this idea. It was easy for us to see rook a6, but remember how tricky that line was? Maybe he didn't see this e4 idea, Maurice, because remember, the whole thing works based on the point that white has e4 and then bishop c4. You know what I mean? That's a tricky thing to see, and I think it's quite possible that, yes, he rushed through it, probably mismanaged when he should have been thinking, but if this was the way to an edge, I think there's a good chance we interview Fabi afterwards and say, hey, what did you see on rook a6? And maybe he just didn't see that line. I mean, that's a tricky idea.
It's a tough one to spot.
Yeah.
At the end, the move bishop to c4, and you need to look at it from way before. It's not that you get there and you find it, because you're losing the e3 pawn.
Yeah.
So you have to be really careful about that. And rook t2 on the board. Fabi now taking a think, but it might be too late, Maurice.
It is too late. It is too late already. The position has died down. This is what you dream about when you're defending positions, that you get a rook ending that is manageable. And the best player in the world is nothing if not a master, maestro, grand maestro. I keep elevating, and I still won't.
Super grand maestro.
I mean, it won't be hyperbole. Whatever I say, whatever word I use at handling endgames, particularly rook endings. This is where you go when you're in trouble, is into a rook ending. You liquidate and you say, prove this position, because they're so linear. They're just so linear. There's no funky knight jumps. There's no imbalances. It's just math. This way, this way, this way, draw. Or this way, this way, this way, win. And if we don't see the win, it's a draw. Rook endings are just the death knell of advantages that should have been what could have happened. And that's what's going on right now. And this position, you are absolutely right. If he missed, then you made this point. If he missed e4, If he did miss it, then that's why he's not playing it. That's why he didn't play this line, because he needs e4 to be the move. I would argue that Fabi, though, sees moves like e4. And even if he didn't, right back here at this moment, as you mentioned, Tanya, he rushed f5. He just rushed it. Like, you get to the, remember he was thinking all those other moments? We were like, why are you thinking now? I mean, the moves look pretty obvious. But in this moment, he did not pause for a second, giving himself the chance to find that e4 idea. He just thought, I got to keep going. I got to keep the energy going. And maybe if he had stopped here, he would have said, wait a second, knight e4 is a move. And that seems to shut things down and create this rook ending I don't want to see. This is the regretful moment for him in this match where he gave away his chances. He plays this move, f5, and allows this rook ending. And this ain't any fun, folks. If it's not winning, it's a draw. It's just that kind of situation because this pawn is going nowhere. You cannot remove the blockader sitting on f8, whether it's a rook or whether it's a king. If you trade rooks, you're not getting rid of that pawn. So your pawn is going nowhere. And meantime, he's got buttons. e3, g3. Hey, I'll pick up h4. What are you doing? This is just nothing. I'm going to call it now. Magnus is winning this match.
It doesn't even matter where the king goes. You just keep pursuing these weaknesses that white has. It looks really scary that the white pawn has gone all the way to the 7th rank, but that's exactly where it stops.
Yeah.
And there's nothing to improve from there. You know, you get that pawn to f7 and you're never dislocating that rook from f8. Yep. You just can't get rid of it. And Fabi, he realizes it now.
As painful as it is to also call the match, I'm going to agree with Maurice and just say that, you know, every game has a story, and okay, we can see the story of the game according to the data. Fabi had an advantage there, the eval bar below us down to equal. And I wonder whether you both would agree with me or not. It feels like the story of the game was Fabi knew he had an edge, but if we're right that he missed castles, what that does to you a little bit emotionally, then you mismanage the clock, then you get the critical position, and you're likely to rush forward in that practical way Maurice said, where you feel like you got to keep the energy up. And again, obviously, we're commentators. We're not actually the players here. We don't know what's in their head. But I think it's fair to unpack that if we're right that Fabi missed castles, then everything else that cascaded from there, the time mismanagement, that was probably correlated because you had to stop and find that e4 idea that Maurice said.
Dude is human. Dude is human too. You miss a move. The game is complicated. And this, by the way, I just want to say to folks out there, I always repeat this over and over. Actually, I said that today about 4 times to my student that I was giving a lesson to. Chess is hard.
Yeah.
Chess is hard. Don't beat yourself up when you lose a game, but anything happens. Learn how to just let it go and move on. I'm saying that to you too, Tanya Sachdev. Let it go and move on. Chess is hard.
That's when you lose. What about when you win? Then you don't want to let it go.
No, you don't want to, but you got to still recognize this game will humble us. This game will humble us. It'll prove to us that we don't know that much. And even great players, the greatest of the great players, the 3rd best in the world, the 3rd best in history, even the great Magnus Carlsen gets in trouble and sometimes loses as well. The game is hard. Give yourself some grace when you make mistakes, even in positions that you thought were completely winning. And for Fabi, he had a fantastic opportunity here on more than one occasion to get that advantage, keep that advantage. But even a great player like that, as you see him now, realizing, regretting his choice, even he makes these kinds of mistakes. And now a chance to win the match and take down Magnus and go to the Armageddon and win 60,000 and then have bragging rights for so long. He's got to concede that it's not going to happen.
Yeah, that slipped away, all of that. And credit to Fabi, you know, at the start of the game, he found some absolutely brilliant ideas, coming back with the bishop to move f4, really putting pressure on Magnus. And he comes back with the king to c1, hitting that rook. Choices for Magnus. He can go after the e3 pawn. He can go after the a2 pawn. I think either ways it seems to work out. And this is just Magnus's bread, butter, every single dish on the planet. He's not messing this one up. With liquidation, with that g-pawn not moving anywhere forward, you take rook takes pawn takes pawn, king g7. Just hold the king side, start marching up the board with the a-pawn, and offer a draw, handshakes.
Yeah, there's just not enough here. As scary as this looks, I think, for a lot of viewers to go, wait a second, the pawn is 1 square away from queening and winning the game, but it's going nowhere. And as Maurice said, rook endings are linear. The dynamics of how the chess geometry works, they don't they either challenge each other too directly or not enough, depending on how you want to look at it. And there's just nothing white can do here to really confuse it. The A-pawn can get involved, as you already pointed out. Black can also continue to pawn hunt, and maybe that's the easiest thing to do, is just something like this. So again, I think for fans watching who are saying, no, I'm in corner Caruana here. Don't tell me it's over. That's the problem, is there's just not enough ways for the rooks, to trick each other. I combined rook and trick and said Rick roll. I don't know what was going on there, but that's what happened.
I think it's going to become
I
a
said
word.
Rick.
I'm feeling it. You got to be a rickster or a trickster. But you know, the thing about linearity, you know, I've talked about chess geometry quite often. I even have a course called Secrets of Chess Geometry. And the thing about linearity, it doesn't only apply to the rooks. It applies to the bishops. It applies to even the queen as well. And I want you to imagine a position, if I may just indulge a little bit. Just imagine this position. Well, let's not use the king as an example. Just imagine there's a queen and a rook guarding a pass pawn. Queen and a rook is guarding a pass pawn on this file. If you put a rook here and a queen to curtail that pawn, don't worry about the king. You literally, your two pieces are slaves to guarding your own pawn. You'd love to push the pawn, but there's a rook and there's a queen, and it's just stopping the pawn from going anywhere. You can't get around this blockade. You need something else to happen somewhere else on the board in order to distract the defense, the queen and the rook, and then maybe you get back to your passed pawn. So even with that, I just put a pawn on the 7th, I just put a rook and queen behind it, and all we had to do was just put something in the way and then use the other piece to guard the pawn as well. And you can't do anything. You just like, how do I make progress? You're going to have to create another threat somewhere else. Does white have another threat somewhere else? Take a look here. Where's white's other thing? Where is white creating another pass pawn? Well, it ain't over here. It's going to have to be somewhere over here. Maybe this e pawn in some dreamland gets up the board. Meantime, black is going to take some stuff. Black, by the way, if you leave this pawn alone, we're taking this one. Your king is not going to defend. Is not going to be the one that takes on e4. If I could do this, okay, now I'm cooking with gas. But it's not going to be the king. It's going to have to be this rook. But if this rook leaves, that pawn's going to drop, and then what do you have? You're back to nothing. So it means you have nothing. There are no diversionary possibilities anywhere on the board. It's just dead. The position is going downhill fast. It's equal. And odds of beating Magnus, you could play this game 100 times. I'm trying to think of the scenario where he loses one. And probably after drinking all night or something. And even then, I don't think he loses this position.
Yeah, what are you talking about? Everyone knows the strongest player on the planet is Magnus, and the second strongest player on the planet is drunk Magnus. So that might not help either. You know, it's really fascinating how accurate a player needs to be on every single move to get this guy.
Yeah, I mean, Fabi was doing it for a while, and he's someone who's done it as good as anybody has in their generation overall against Magnus. He's gone toe-to-toe with him many times. But I think we're probably right. We will likely have a chance to catch up with both players afterwards and just see what Fabi...
You know,
this surprises me, by the way.
The engine, though, after that last move, after all the virtues we've extolled, the engine that said that of all moves is suboptimal. It's still within drawing margins, but this may have given some chance. Are we seeing a potential turnaround?
It's an odd choice from Magnus,
really
too, to play rook d3 when rook takes a2.
Cuts off the white king, picks up a pawn in one move, and you can keep pursuing the pawns on the next one. Yeah, I'm surprised with this one, Danny.
Well, although, I think sometimes we have the eval bar bias-itis. It's an affliction.
But rook takes pawn has got little to do with an eval bar.
I agree, but what I'm saying is I don't think that it's changed that much. I think that, yes, it's not ideal, but just looking at what the top engine line was, it's still headed for what we had called, which is too many weaknesses, not enough time for white.
Danny, you're killing our hopes.
I'm sorry. I just think it was a little bit of a shift, but not as much as we would like to think. But
you're absolutely right. Of course, you're absolutely right. It's just when we talked about no other option somewhere, nothing else. If white plays rook takes a7 and has the a pawn still, like, oh wait a minute, maybe I got a little something. But so why not just kill the a pawn and then white has nothing anywhere else? Magnus is willing to let the a-pawn stay on the board and say, well, it's not going to be enough, folks. Don't worry about it. I got this under control. So we're going to have to trust him that he's right. And I think you're right as well. It's just not that much.
There's a funny idea I want to show. I wonder if Magnus saw this. So one of the things about this is that if white ever takes the a7 pawn, do you just have more than that? You have a win. You have a trap.
The white king is looking very, very vulnerable right now. It's got none of the rook defenses. And what is it? Is it just check? Where is it?
I played this for a draw. I don't know what the computer thinks, but I thought he's setting a trap. He played this move rook to d3 because it's actually the fastest way to perpetual. But
no, the rook's hanging. There's
the rook
hanging on f6. So.
Okay, so that's why you're winning. You just take the rook.
Yeah.
Okay, so Magnus set.
I think your point was before taking pawn takes pawn, you wanted to take on a7, Danny. That's the line you want to show.
Yeah. Okay, if you take the pawn here, I think he's setting a trap for an instant draw because the king is just trapped.
That's right.
And it's a perpetual. Okay, so sorry. I got distracted with the eval bar because they actually played too fast for me. G takes f7, king g7 is already on the board. But a funny little idea with rook d3 that maybe he was setting a perpetual trap.
I think so, because you can't go back with your king on the first rank because there would have been checkmate then.
Yeah.
So that would have ended the game on the spot. So not allowing that a passer for white with the move rook d3.
Yes. By the way, the eval, the engine has funny metrics, and since we do have Mr. Chess.com himself, you can talk about it. The move king g7, nobody would ever give an exclamation mark. No human would say, oh, well, that's great. King g7, that's a kind of move. High five, our boy found it. Not so much. King g7, you run of the bill, nothing move. But we do have an exclamation mark. Danny, I'm going to throw that to you. Why is that exclamation mark on the board?
What's funny is we use that move actually when it's the only move, which is it's a hard thing to dial in with the computer and the way that humans think about it. And again, I'm 100% agreeing with you, of course, but the use of it in terms of how we built the game review, which is these animations on the board to try to bring it to life, is usually designed to say not that it's an exclamation move, but that it was the only move to keep the eval where it is. It was the only balanced move. So I agree. That's why. I guess it's saying that these two moves are not good, which probably is true because, like you said, no human would ever play those. You just play king g7. But yeah, you know, we're working all the time. We're working on trying to improve.
Logical. John Nunn had that convention in his book, his Endgame books, that the only move you play should be given an exclamation mark if it's a really, truly an only move. So you're in good company. But by the way, Fabi is trying to do a little something over here to keep things alive. This is not keeping hope alive here at all. This is just liquidating more stuff. And Magnus has various ways to get equality in this position. So it's exciting to see a move like g4 happen. Is that something going on? Not for Fabi fans. There's nothing. It's still slowly, maybe even quickly, racing towards a completely dead drawn position.
Magnus hasn't made a move, and that's really interesting because when I saw g4 on the board, my first thought is, you've got to take this pawn. You can't just allow white to take on h5, go h6, distract the king, and perhaps find a way to enter through the g line. Like, that just can't be it. And then, you know, that moment comes to my mind when Magnus did not rush with king g7. He finds rook d2, a move that's better than what our engines actually suggested earlier on. And once again, it's that feeling of just alpha Magnus in endgames. What else does he have in mind if not pawn takes pawn when the h5 pawn is clearly hanging?
He has rook f3. He has rook f3 looking for more trades of the biggest pieces.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And if you can get rid of rooks, and then I can get rid of your f-pawn, and we can just march nicely into a no-nothing rook and pawn ending, that's what you're going to do. So it's not that he's not going to play your move. Like, he may in the end go, yeah, actually forget about this, it's too complicated. I can just take on g4. But what do we say about him in endgames? I mean, the guy's just spectacular. So he's going to find intriguing, different kind of ideas that we might think of as combinations in other positions. Ooh, you sack a queen, right? You sack a rook, you check, and it's mate. Ooh, styling. He's going to do stuff like that in endgames where he just makes a move. You go, what's that? Wait a minute. Oh, wait. Oh, we're only finding out why that's good 10 moves from now. He's got that kind of nuanced feel in endgames, and he relishes them. You said, Tanya, you got to beat him in the opening. You got to beat him in the middle game. You got to beat him in the end game, where he's as good as anybody, if not better than anybody on the planet. Good luck with that.
The definition of you see a good move, you look for a better one. That's what Magnus is doing right now. And I think Maurice is right. I didn't see rook f3, but the moment you said it, I'm like, yeah, actually, maybe that's exactly what he's thinking about. And sometimes that can get you in trouble. You can't always, look for a better move if you're under time pressure. It is a game. But I think Magnus defines that, as you said, Maurice, with his poise. Okay, he does end up going for the most logical move, but he probably calculated rook f3 enough before deciding that this is the simplest and maybe safest path.
Yeah, pawn takes pawn, and I think he was thinking where he wants to move with the king, because you also want to make sure you really want to play king to f6 right now. And then you're calculating what actually happens if the h-pawn joins the party and starts pushing, marching up the board. And I think that's what Magnus was also trying to contemplate, because you really don't want to put your king on the h-line in this position.
Yeah, feels wrong. Feels scary, actually, in terms of mating nets, whether they're real or not. The moment you put your king over here, you just start having nightmares about something bad happening. So if you can make king f6 work, laughing a little bit in the face of the h-pawn, and maybe it's just straightforward. I mean, oh, no, there you go. That's
Not straightforward.
You are asking for
It's
trouble.
tricky then.
So what
you
is
can't
it?
play like this because rook g6 and then rook g8. So
That's it.
You have to be careful.
That's it.
So
rook g6 and rook g8.
yeah, you have to watch yourself.
But then after h5, you can't take because there's rook f4.
Correct. There is still a tiny bit of spice. The best move here is actually king h8. It is the top move, is to back your king into the corner, which none of us would want to play.
That is the opposite of what we were just talking about. What's funny is that with the king on h8, just point out none of these tricks work, because now when you take, you can stop the checkmate. Oh, sorry, the rook goes over.
Rook h5.
The mouse slip. But yeah, that's actually really counterintuitive, but really instructive, that by putting the king on the worst possible square, you open up a defensive resource. Okay, but that was okay. So I just showed how. I just hit my mic too. I just showed how you can lose this game potentially here. Mm-hmm. This is okay.
This is really interesting, because I just want to say king to h8, yes, once you play it out, it makes a lot of sense. But it's really the last move that you want to make in this position. Put your king on the last rank, get it into this kill zone where you can be getting checkmated from the back rank or from the h file. Magnus has slowed down. And we also saw that after king f6, h5, there's still a narrow path to equality. You probably have to be really precise. He's trying to work it out. I think he's the master of precision when it comes to endgame. There's a debate whether he's the GOAT of chess, and we've got all our opinions on it. But when it comes to endgames, I think it is believed that he is the greatest player of all time, because he just seems to find the best way possible. What are we guys expecting? King f6 and that narrow path to draw, or king h8 and Magnus Carlsen seen it all?
Well, I think Magnus is definitely looking at both those options, and he's realizing that king f6 has given white that extra thing that he needed. Remember we talked about that? What I said was, yes, you have the f-pawn, but because of the linearity of endgames, it's not enough. You need something else. You need another type of distraction. And that's what the h-pawn has become, that additional type of distraction that you can't control so easily. As soon as you try to play rook h3 to slow it down, suddenly rook g6, rook g8 appears on the board and you're dead lost. So Magnus has allowed, and Fabi has concocted, give Fabi credit, by the way, he has concocted the exact additional distraction he needs to give his f-pawn some force. Not king h8, okay, your h-pawn's going nowhere, sorry. Let's drop the whole discussion. But you have to play king h8. You have to actually recognize, I've got to curtail that bad boy, and I've got to curtail it quickly, and maybe right now. Now, it doesn't mean that king f6 is absolutely losing, but you give your opponent a little bit additional chances if you play it. So Magnus is deep in his bag right now trying to think about it, and he's now gone under Fabi in time when he had a lead on the clock. So once again, folks, chess is hard. This is hard. You got the greatest player of this generation. You can say GOAT of all time. Nobody can really define that, but we know we can define of this generation, and he himself is looking at this position and going, oh, I'm a specialist at these things, and I'm finding it difficult to decide.
And that is really between these two moves, right? Because king h7 runs into rook c5. You already showed that. There is no idea of the rook coming to defend the king on the h-line. King h6 runs into rook g8. So both the moves lose on the spot. Process of elimination. King h8 is not a move, it's not a hand move. It's the move that your hand is fighting against.
Yep.
It's really not what you want to make unless you sit down, calculate, and realize that it holds everything. But what your heart really wants to do right now is play King f6 and find a way forward. And that's why Magnus is taking his time. He's trying to make King f6 work.
He's calculating deeply. I'm calculating whether he got his heart rate monitor in the right position, because it had his heart rate still so low that I was about to call BS on that. I'm like, is he really that calm underneath when we've seen him stress? We've seen him head his hand. I'm obviously, it's super fun to talk about, but I do know that when you wear those things, you got to get in the right spot. Because I'm like, is he really just that calm right now?
It's actually the highest we've seen. He's been in the 70s.
Okay,
so it's at least shot up over 80
He's
per
just the
moment.
next level, whatever it is. The guy doesn't get rattled. But I agree with you, Tanya. I think he's trying to make King f6 work because King h8 is just it's a hard thing to commit to. But Magnus has found moves like that before, and he might again.
And he decides that it's
King f6.
And King f6 has a technical ending right in its sights. So King f6 is being considered a bad move by the engine because it says that King h8 is actually more accurate. But what Magnus is seeing is that he has this technical known ending that could be played. If rook takes on e4, takes, he's going down literally 2 pawns after rook a4. That's 2. But this A and H pawn is known to be drawn. And I mean, not all of them are known to be drawn, but this one is. And so this is a position that he can play, bring his king over on this side, and look to make an equal position. But will he actually get this? Will Fabi, who knows it as well, try to keep the position busy and give himself other options? Magnus is, let's get clear, he's a little bit walking a tightrope, just a little bit, in this position.
It's the tightest rope. It's the only move in the position. Everything else loses for Magnus right now. He has to play rook f3 and he finds it.
He found it. And I took a deep breath right there because I was like, are we about to see a blunder?
No, it's technical. I mean, he's not going to play rook h3. He's found, this is what he was looking at, and he's looking for that technical ending. Chess is a combination between technique and practicality. You can study all the endgame books you want and not be a great practical player, but you can also study generalized practical principles and not know specifically this sucker we're walking into is a draw. And I know it's a draw. That's what Magnus is doing right now. He's confident. He knows that this is a draw. Even going down 2 pawns, he's going right for it and saying, beat me with these ridiculous A and H pawns. They're not good enough. They're the worst pawns you can have in these kind of endings. And he's confident he's going to pull it off.
But is it that really, Maurice? Because, okay, rook f3 is forced, right? You've got to fight that rook g6, rook g8 idea. Also, giving a check on e1 only would have helped white before putting it on the f-file because the white king moves forward. Do you think he's as confident as we all believe him to be? Or is it just something that he has to play right now?
I mean, it could be both, right? And Maurice has said that's what the great players want. They want only moves in many cases, even if they're difficult to find. Obviously here, I think the engine accurately gives it the exclamation point because as you said, Tanya, whether he's deep in his own table base in his mind and knows this is a draw because he's that good, or whether it's just a move. I agree, we don't know, but I think he had to find this move. I want to point out that the clock situation has turned around. Again, Fabiano was down on the clock. At one point, we had 12 minutes to 6 minutes.
Yeah.
We now have 6 to 5. And again, these are human beings playing chess without the help of commentators, despite the fact that we're not close to their level and the engine eval bar. This is suddenly, we're a moment away here from something that could slip. So I think Magnus has found the only move, and I think it should still be a draw, but buckle up.
But it's not over. I think this is far from over.
He didn't find the only move alone. He found, system thinker, he found the idea in general. Like the move just fits the idea, what he was aiming for, which was this technical ending. So it just, once he knows what he's going for, the moves come easier for him, and he knows what to go for better than anybody else. All of them know the kind of direction they want to go in or what to go for, but Magnus just knows it all, which is like a matter of course. And so that's why he just went for this. And we're seeing the endgame play itself out. Rook takes. We will see the trade. We will see Fabi be up 2 pawns, and we will, well, I feel that we'll see Magnus draw that position quite confidently because he's going to lose the A pawn, or not just, the H pawn, and not be able to make any progress if he keeps it. And what I mean by that is, in this line here, takes, rook to a4, king to g8, and now take. And now he can play rook f5. And what are you doing with this pawn? If you push it, you're going to eventually lose it. You can't play this move, by the way, because after king moves, it looks like, ooh, I've done all I need to do on this side. And as soon as you start bringing your king up, I'm going to play a random move, and I can start playing for checks. And whoop, wait, what happened? You can't take the piece. It's a draw. So this h-pawn can hit h7 and allow the stalemating situation here. So what are you going to do?
You put it on h6 and you defend that pawn. So what's the holding technique in that position? You don't push it all the way to h7.
But the pawn is being attacked. It's going to get attacked by the rook until you push it. That's what he's trying to do. He's trying to force you to push it. Like what else are you going to do? You're losing it.
Rook f5,
and if you're losing it, you're in the technical position with the rook and the pawn ending again. And that one, unless this king is literally miles away. Okay, it's far, but it's not far enough because your king is not close enough. So you got to push this pawn has to be on a7 with a rook on a8 with your king miles away for me to then get something where I bring my rook in, or maybe I don't push it all the way to a7 for you to have any chance. It's so far what you need to win with the a pawn that you have no chance of winning the position. You literally have zero.
Yeah.
He's going to take this guy, he's going to bring his king over, he's going to use his rook to harass you, and it's just a draw.
Yeah.
It's just, that's all it is. It's just this basic rook and pawn against rook and wrong pawn. I mean, rook and wrong pawns against rook. You got two of them. Oh, there's another point I wanted to make, but now I realize Magnus has a better way of doing it, is there was a way of doing it poorly, and that was to play this move.
Yeah.
Like, why would you do it this way and allow this possibility? And this one intrigued me. It's the first thing that flashed in my mind because rooks belong behind passed pawns. But it intrigued me because this rook is now forced to sort of like defend. Because if you start checking, how does the king do work, right? And maybe even this king will come up, so your king can't defend. So this is probably drawn too, but why go for it when you can actually laterally attack the pawn and force the action immediately? So rook h3 is just an inferior version of this rook f5 idea. And it's just a draw. This one is just not going to lead anywhere. Magnus, we could call it, will win this match. He's got 60 grand coming in his pocket if he just makes the next few moves and show it. And Fabi himself knows it at the moment.
Yeah, and this is the moment, right? And he gives a check first.
Interesting.
He allows Fabi's king to step up, which can only be better for Fabi.
He's funky fresh. He's freestyling right now, going into any position he wants.
He has the same rook c5 idea, I guess, next. It doesn't inherently change Maurice's point that the lateral attack is probably the most accurate. It made me think, is there a reason stepping to the second rank runs into some sort of skewer? But I don't think so. I think that if the king moves up, you still don't want to go for this, I don't think. But maybe I'm wrong. I mean, maybe...
King d2, you're on point. It's on the board.
Okay, it's going to happen.
Weird.
What does Magnus want with this
That's
check?
a little weird to me. That's
what's funny is that it's still the same.
Yes, but that idea of having the lateral attack on h5, the horizontal attack just makes so much more sense than putting it behind the pawn. And he can still go rook c5. Has anything changed here?
No, he could. It is funny because now that Maurice mentioned it, I'm like fascinated in my brain about the fact that when you get this position, just to show it, like, it's actually still just a draw because the rook is frozen to both pawns and the king is going to sit. But look, Magnus has gone for a passive defense. Anti-Dvoretsky school puts the rook on c7 to guard the pawn.
I am shocked at this choice. I mean, the other line just was drawn, but he's seen another line that he says, this is also drawn. So it just goes to show that all rookie things are drawn. There's just different ways to do it. I assume that he was going to play the one that's just so technically nothing, but he's just like, yeah, this is technically nothing too, folks. It may be passive. It may seem like it's going to give some chances, but you ain't winning this either.
Yeah, and I think this is all about getting the rook to check the king now. And I think we can show that with arrows or something, Danny, that the white king marches up to d6. All black needs to do is put that rook on f7. And then whenever the king goes across, you start checking the king laterally and driving it back again. right now, first, Fabi wants to get this pawn to a5 before putting the king up. But to that point, I'm surprised as well because it felt like Magnus had a direct path and an immediate path to draw, right? Forcing that white pawn to h7.
Actually, your point is even better than what you said. When you talk about the king coming up the board, the rook on f7. I mean,
white isn't even threatening anything.
Why don't we play it on your board?
Yeah.
You don't mind. Just play it on. Let's get the position.
No, I would put the king on e6 first.
Yeah. No, but I think Maurice is making the point.
Yeah, let's just make a few
White
moves.
isn't even threatening anything.
Right. So,
Like,
okay.
Wait.
That one turns out to fail probably because of a rook.
The rook,
A rook moving out the way, and now the king is marching in with a6, etc. So it is possible to lose the position if you're not careful.
Tricky.
Still, but I think that
Well, rook c5 you're saying is the only move here?
I think that you have
rook
to go,
c5 is the move. It's always a move. It's
have to
never,
go
it's
back
never
to
like
this
never
idea.
not a move. It's always a move. This is now going back to the position that we talked about. Like this is the way you defend.
And this
But-
is the defense. Let's just show that why that holds, because I think this is super instructive, right? After this, king d4, you can start following the rook, but now you go rook f5. Every time the white king joins that a pawn, connects itself to it to defend it, you start checking it, driving it away, and then attack the a pawn again.
That's right. That's right. And
Yeah.
it's just that lateral stuff, and Magnus is aiming for it. He's put his rook on f7. And also in the line, as
I'm just trying to
making a good point, making it as frustrating as ever. We've all been there. You can't win the position. It's just that kind of rook ending. But the point that I was saying that you made, Tanya, is even if the king got to c6, it's the same. You can't do anything. I can give you progress with a king on c6. No, with the a pawn on the board and the rook on a7, a6.
Let's have the live
Still.
board.
Let's get back to the live board so we can. This is what I was talking about. So let's just make.
He's gone rook f7, by the way.
This is the square, right? So now let's say you play. Let's play a5. Let's play king. Let's play rook g7. Let's play king d4.
But that's the point. You can't allow the white rook to move away.
Rook to move.
And this is
Oh
really...
yeah, no, you have to go back to rook f5 again.
You have to go rook f5. That's the only move, Danny. If you give white the opportunity to move the rook and push that a pawn, you're busted.
Okay, so yes, we know that. So I don't want to say we're making the best moves. I just want to get to a position. So I'm just pushing this forward. Let's just play the move. We know it's losing, but rook g7, king up, rook back to f7, king d5, not e5, king d5, and play king king back, yeah. So this is what I'm talking about. This position here, king c6, that's the move, king c6. Right here, just forget how I got here. Here, how do you win? White can't move anything. Like, White just can't move anything. Even though white tried to make this progress, white can't move anything. So yes, the other positions were drawn. Yes, we shouldn't have gotten to this position, but I just wanted to make this point as well, how difficult it is to make progress. In the meantime, let's get back to the game.
This is very clever because Fabi takes away rook to f5. If it's white to move right now, he wants to push a5, and there's no stopping the idea of moving the rook away and pushing the a pawn.
Yeah, it's actually a very tricky move. And by the way, Magnus only has 3 minutes. Bobby has 6 minutes. So you move the rook, and now if you play a5,
Then rook c5, but he needs to
you still have
that,
the
right?
idea. But if you make one more rook on the 7th rank move, we've seen it now a few times, you lose the game. And so Bobby is very aware that Black's drawing ideas to get the rook to the 5th rank at the right time. So king e4, trying to trick Magnus with his own tricks, right? But
He's
silly
a
Bobby
rickster.
tricks are for Magnus.
Aren't you a little shocked that we're here?
Yeah.
I mean,
No,
the other
I
line,
agree with you.
the other line was just known stuff. The rook f5 lets you have the pawns, the 2 pawns, and that's not a draw. Did he play it?
No, he blundered.
Did he actually play this move?
And wait, what's the problem? Because he wants to go rook to g5 on a5. So why is this bad?
No, but is rook?
What's
no.
the problem?
What
Wait,
the
we have to
heck?
work this out.
I mean,
Magnus
but-
sees it, right? He needs to put the rook on the 5th rank. But why is this the wrong square?
Because if a5, you can't play rook g5 now? Let's look at it. If
Oh my
a5,
goodness.
rook g5, now when you take, the king is too far, I guess. You're winning because you waited too long.
Unbelievable. I can't believe this
It's
is
the same
happening.
position. The rook could be on c5, and that's a draw, apparently. This position with the rook on c5 is a draw. So I'm trying to understand what's the difference here. He's put the rook on the wrong square for some reason.
No, now listen. The ending that's winning is the king sitting down on a7, b8, etc. Right? The white king getting there. You don't want the white king to do this at all. So that's the winning plan for white if he can get it. And the black king has to be close enough.
Oh my goodness.
Right? The black king and Fabi messed up and didn't play a5. Incredible. They're misplaying.
Did we actually figure out why?
A technical and so it's. Let's go back here. A5 was kicker. If you play this move,
yes,
you lose this pawn. If you play king h6, then now we can go for this particular endgame. You could try this, but suddenly we have a different position. You have to go to g4, and you're on the wrong side of history right here.
And I think that's the point.
Whatever you do, if you try to get here, well, actually, this is playable now because the king is coming really fast. This king is not where it needs to be. It just is on the wrong side. It should be coming somewhere in here. And instead, this king, as I pointed out, is going in this camp really, really fast. It's going to come straight across, hit that with tempo, get in there, and he's going to block you off at some point. So this position was lost. We just saw two of the best players on the planet misplay a technical ending. And actually, Magnus gave Fabi a chance, and Fabi missed it.
But it's not over.
No, it's not. If that could happen, then anything
Exactly.
could happen.
That's what I'm saying. What we just saw there is that we are capable of having that whatever it is, defibrillator there, the eval bar heart attack that just happened, right? I mean, that is a thing that might happen again if it's happened once. And so, yes, it's still a draw apparently, but only 3 minutes for Magnus.
He's got to work this out, right? Because it's clear that the problem with Rook G7 is perhaps that they're not aware of it. And the line that Maurice showed, the big takeaway is that in that line, Black cannot come back with the king to G6 with the rook on G5. That's the wrong square for the rook. And if that comes again, maybe Fabi this time will find the way forward.
Right.
Exactly, because there's no progress to be made with the king moving ahead. And this is something we've already seen.
It's super easy to miss because it's such a subtle and seems like a dismissive idea that the rook is taking away the square from the king in those lines where you need to get back. And so, again, I'm obviously just drawing arrows to remind you of the line that Marie showed. But if it happened once, it could happen again. Don't go anywhere. Both players are about to get under 3 minutes here. And Fabi, he's got nowhere else to go. This is the game he has to try to win. So don't think he's just going to suddenly say, Magnus, you know what? You've earned it. Here's a draw, buddy.
I can't believe what happened.
Yeah,
I can't, you know, he said he could roll out of bed, he could be drunk, he would find the way to draw. Sometimes it pays to be stupid. I'm gonna tell you straight. Sometimes it pays to be stupid because, like, I don't know about rook endings. I don't know half of what Magnus knows. Like, I just don't, right? He knows all these incredible nuances, but sometimes if you just got, you got like a couple of tricks, a couple of things you do know, then you just go for that thing you do know. Like that endgame over there is a draw. I'm just going to go for it. All that other fancy stuff, I don't know about. You got to play accurately and know what to do on the fifth rank and on the rank and all that. That's too much work.
We got to.
But because Magnus maybe knows a little too much, he might go to something else that somehow the other idea slipped out of his memory banks. And when you're under pressure like this and you're playing in a vault and there's a $44 million stash of gold actually only about 20 feet away from you and $60,000 you about to pocket and your clock's ticking down, maybe even the GOATs make mistakes. And we've actually seen it here, a move that unbelievably uncharacteristic of Magnus Carlsen.
But we may have another one here because according to the computer, if you don't find A5, you might put yourself back in a losing spot. If we, go back to the main board here. This is a blue arrow move, according to the computer. It only disappeared because I drew the orange arrow on top of it. But that's a hard move to play.
It is.
It's super tough because psychologically you're sitting in this defensive structure for the last as many move, the A7 pawn controlled rook on F7. The moment you push it to A5, it's super vulnerable. Also to point out the white king really close. King C6, king B5 comes in immediately. Fabi's idea is clear though, right? He wants that A pawn on A6. In these endgames, once you get A6, Black is almost always busted because there are ideas of the rook coming to B7 next.
Yep. And by the way, Magnus under 2 minutes now. Like this.
That's why that pawn should have been on, for white actually should have been on A5 a long time ago. Everything you just said is accurate, Tanya. This pawn should have been a little bit down the board, and now it is Magnus's only chance to solidify. And by the way, even if you play a5, you still have to play good moves. You never want to have to be too smart. Like in chess, I don't care. You say, oh, they're grandmasters. You never want to have to be too smart. You want to play the dumb stuff and still draw the game. Like, oh, you just do that, you just do that. It's easy. Now you got to actually be Magnus Carlsen to find a5, and it's not clear that he sees it. And his clock, time pressure makes fools of us all. And Magnus might just find himself in deep trouble if he doesn't find the move a5, which is not an instant equalizer, by the way. It's not like, oh, we know the path to a draw.
I don't think he sees it. I mean, just like looking at his body language, he's like hardly even looking over there. I'm like, he's about to get under a minute, and just as I say it, 57, 56.
Yes.
Like, this is a problem.
He's not. He's reaching out for something else.
See it.
He's
like,
not picking the pawn.
This heart rate of his has also gotten higher, and here comes rook f4, and white is winning for the second time in the game if Fabiano finds the right idea. And by the way, this one's more obvious, just a5. Like, this is a one that is not a subtle, awkward rook on g7 takes away a square from the king. I think we're going to Armageddon.
Unbelievable. I can't. I'm stunned. I'm shocked. I'm flabbergasted, bamboozled. I don't know. I'm just trying to find some kind of way of saying, what the hell just happened? What just happened? How is it that Magnus took that endgame and now has found himself in a world of trouble? And by the way, ChessCom, how come this engine here has him as only +1 and yours over there has it as completely cold? Is this some kind of programming issue here?
No, it's two reasons. Yeah, the analysis board, when you pull it up in full access, is a stronger engine. This is a stronger engine than the small live board where the mini board's coming in from.
He gives it
It
check.
takes a second, but okay.
Just blocks it.
Rook e5 blocks it.
He has to stop a6, Danny. So he goes back one step. And now, is there a way for Fabi to force matters, to get that pawn to the square that he wants it at? Can he simply slide over with the king? Is that the idea? Or you want to show something else?
Well, I feel like now we're in the worst territory possible for Magnus, because you look at the top 3 to 5 moves for white, they're all still winning. Like, you could play several moves here, and white is actually in control, and that is why I'm saying I think we're going to Armageddon. I think Fabi.
No, you're right.
The beauty of this thing now is that he can play a move that we all relish playing, and it's the move rook to g5.
Yeah.
Like, that's a move you just love. The king cannot leave the rank. It cannot leave the h file. It cannot step up to h6 because of rook g6. So your king is frozen out of the game. And then we get a couple of free moves to play to bring our king closer. And then we play rook g6 anyway.
Yep. No,
it's just straight. It's just, if Fabi finds rook g5, moves his king over, plays rook g6, brings the king in. It's lights out.
By the way, I should clarify, if Fabiano wins this game, we have 2 rapid tiebreak games first, and then Armageddon. So if you wondered what you were doing before 2 a.m. in Singapore, you need to reschedule.
I thought I was going to have dinner after this.
There's our format before your very eyes. We're still in this classical portion of the match, 60 minutes plus 30 seconds, boys and girls. But next is 2 10 plus 10 games. That's right.
I love it.
Are we getting paid overtime for this?
I want this to go down to the wire. I don't care about dinner right now, Maurice. I don't know
Overtime
what
chess.
you're talking
I haven't eaten in days. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
It's 11:45 right now. We're going to be past midnight playing chess.
It is.
There are people on the East Coast
I love it.
back home in the U.S. and they're like, "Ooh, I just had breakfast.
Yeah.
Came my feet back. Watch some
Best
overtime
Friday
chess."
night ever.
We got heart rate and drama. We got all kinds of stuff going on in this broadcast. So
140 for Fabi.
that's pretty high.
That's pretty high.
It's unbelievable.
And by the way, Magnus was almost touching 100 in this rook ending. We haven't seen that happen.
He did not play. He played something else. He's going for another line. By the way, he has enough of an edge that black king is just so putrid on the back row that this is also winning. It's just too far ahead.
Although I should show that I think rook takes a7
It's a big blunder.
is the one way to give it back,
Yeah.
right? Now when we check and take the pawn, hold the phone, apparently. Oh, no,
I
we're
think
back to
keep
this
checking.
idea.
We're in
We've seen this. We
Vancouver,
checked
draw,
it. Okay, yeah,
draw
checking.
territory.
Yeah, so as long as you don't forget that idea. But Fabi doesn't have to pick. He can play rook e6. Sorry, Tanya, go ahead.
No, you're totally right. The point is that once you put your rook on a7, there's no way to form a bridge for the checks to protect your king against the checks. And once your king gets too far drawn on the right side of the board, black simply captures the h-pawn, and then there's no improvement to be made. Because white needs to connect the king and the pawn to make it move forward. So rook takes pawn right now would be a big blunder, but I believe we do have a check. So he's gone, no, he's moved king to g8.
Not yet. Yeah, Magnus played king g8.
I want to tell you, this rook e7 thing was not the right move. Rook g5 was the right move. Because here, you have to go back to e5 at some point.
Oh.
You just have nothing to do. Rook e6. So you play check, king g8. This is what Fabi's seeing. He's seeing a pawn sitting there. Why rook g5 wasn't on the board is going to come to him as a realization. Rook e6 now allows rook f5 check.
Yeah, then you got to.
And then what are you going to do? You're going to play rook e5 again.
Yeah.
And then we're back to this. So he actually made a mistake playing check with his rook. We're seeing some mistakes in endgames with both sides under time pressure. I think Fabi has now suddenly realized, oh, whoa, I can't take what looked like a free pawn. I'm going to have to back up.
This position is not great for Fabi's heart at all.
I was just going to say that. And we are over 150 for the first time today. So whoever had that on their bingo card, you just won. Somebody is now rocking a north of 150 heart rate. By the way, some people you got to run a few miles before you can get your heart that high. So that tells you what's going on with the drama on a chessboard, in case you thought this wasn't a sport.
Rook g5.
This is crazy. Okay.
No.
Just like that.
No. No way.
This has got to be elementary.
Yeah, and Magnus knew it. You could tell by how he played rook f5. I think he knows he's got it in the bag.
You've got Magnus fans are jumping up and down right now. That's unbelievable what just happened.
I think he might be calculating a different approach, but just didn't remember or forgot that Magnus doesn't have to take the h-pawn.
Danny, there isn't this. I mean, for their level, this is absolutely elementary. You don't have a place to hide with the king. And now you can just simply take the pawn. You can go rook h5. You can, I don't know if you can give it. Actually, rook h5 is possible here. Just make a move and see what happens. Oh my goodness. So. And the reason is?
Because now you get the a6
king
square that we talked about.
No, we go king. Oh.
I think you have the cave. The king.
No, but rook h6, how are you winning this?
The king just comes up.
King b5 check. Oh, you go to b7 and you hide.
Yeah, you're hiding from the.
He doesn't take it.
Yeah, Magnus doesn't take h5. He plays king h8, reminding Fabi that king on the 4th rank is going nowhere.
You know what this is, right?
Never getting in.
You know what this is? The ending we should have had about 5 moves ago.
That's right.
Right? This is the same ending. This is the ending when I said, I'm stupid enough to play this ending. This is that ending now. He's down 2 pawns, and this is a draw with the rook on the rank, the rank, and the pawns push, and you just get your draw. So finally, after a lot of drama that was completely unnecessary, we have this particular ending, and this one, we average folk can look and go, okay, that's a draw. You should have done that a long time ago instead of playing all this drama. I cannot believe what transpired to get us to this situation. But now, I'm not going to predict the draw, by the way.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't say it anymore if you're rooting for Magnus.
Or maybe I should, because it helps us to see some other stuff happen.
I wanted those rapid games. I wanted that Armageddon. We were so close to that.
I want the best chess always, and it was. I thought that we were getting Armageddon at that point, and I jinxed it the other way, but.
It's your fault. That's what we're going to say.
It's always my fault. That's okay.
Yeah, and Fabi realizes it now. I don't know if you saw that reaction.
Yeah,
he does. He just banged king
d4.
d4.
That was a frustrated head nod. And by the way, he was down to 10 seconds.
G5.
Oh my gosh.
How could you not? This is an off-form Fabi, I'm going to say, because what he did to not win this game, I can't.
Yeah,
I can't.
I wonder what he was seeing ghosts of some kind in its heart. I feel like we knew the thread that led to some bad time management and the mistakes that happened earlier. If you're just tuning in, Fabi maybe had a chance to grind an edge until he kind of allowed a rook ending, but we won't go back in time right now. We knew the thread though. We thought that Fabi maybe forgot about castles and freestyle. Here we just don't quite know what the thread was to lead to him not seeing rook g5 other than it's midnight. Maybe he's tired. They did spend a lot of time on a yacht today, I can tell you that.
Yeah, that must have been exhausting, Danny.
By the way, it came down hard today. It was storming in Singapore. They were caught out on the water.
Chilling on a boat, I can't imagine a more difficult day to spend.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, this to me is absolutely shocking. You know, like I said, this is elementary stuff. You take that pawn on a7. For these guys, they know that this position's a draw simply because the white king can never get connected to that pawn.
Yep.
Magnus will shuffle around on the 6th rank, stay connected to that pawn on a6. The moment the white king moves forward, he'll start checking. And that's it. The most you can do is give a check on a8 and get that pawn to the 7th rank. And that's where it stops.
Yep.
There's no improvement to be made. And this is stuff that these guys know at the back of their hand. Even if you played rook e7 in that position, you don't take that a7 pawn.
This is Vancouver, it's called. Vancouver draw territory. And it's just the same technique that's being displayed right now with the rook sitting on the lateral attack, not sitting behind the pawn, but sitting laterally. And he just has nothing to worry about. Your H pawn is just too dumb. We're talking stupidity right now. That H pawn is just pretty stupid. You got an F pawn. Oh, that's a different kind of pawn. But the H pawn, no, nobody's worried about that one. It can't do anything to affect proceedings, and it can only stalemate, and you got all these checks that are happening. And sorry, you ain't number one in this position. This is the one we should have seen maybe 30 minutes ago when we could have been all going out and having our dinners. But they gave all of us some heart palpitations. I'm sure you added the heart meter to us.
No, I mean, by the way, that's the innovation production team. Let's get some heart rate monitors on Maurice over there and see how much calories he burns in a commentary session. Maurice is standing the whole time, by the way, champion. No, but you're right. I mean, you see it, like everyone thinks I make up the drama. I literally have PTSD over here when the eval bar slides up. I'm like that was a moment we weren't expecting because you just don't see it that often. You look at the story of the game down there, the game arc, and you can see that those types of swings are very rare amongst the world's elite. But it is one of the reasons we love freestyle, even though we can't really attribute the rook ending blunders here to freestyle.
That's just a rook and pawn.
This was just a rook and pawn ending. I guess it was a rook and pawn ending roller coaster. Is that a word I can use?
It really was.
You can use that word. You can use that.
But the ride's about to end now, right? Because Magnus has found the perfect defensive setup. Nothing to be done. Just maintain it on the 6th rank. You could go to c6. And then once the king comes closer, then you go to the right side of the board with the rook. Just shuffle around. And everything's done. Fabi had that moment, right? Which was just unbelievable that Magnus gave him that chance to start with.
Totally. And the shuffling of Fabi there, just the dejected kind of look he has now, I think we might be moments away from a handshake. So we should keep these guys on camera. Fabi's not looking happy. Yeah, he knows it's
like he's about to offer a draw. That's the feeling you get.
Yeah, that's the body language I'm getting to. That we're moments away.
You know, Fabi said, as you're seeing it now, Fabi said something very, very strange to me. I invited him to Jamaica to come inspire some kids from my home country. And while I was interviewing him, as we see this repetition happen, Fabi said he never really got deep into endgames. He said, you know, Maurice is better at endgames than I am. I'm like, no, I'm not. Stop being ridiculous. But it was kind of a weird admission that endgames were not his real forte. He doesn't have fun in them. He really has fun in exploring the openings and like sharp middle game ideas. Like endgames, the way Magnus is just an absolute maestro. And he should have said that. Magnus is much better at endgames than I am, because I'm certainly not. But he was making a big point that this is just not like his natural fingertips. And missing rook g5, for example, and letting this endgame happen, you go, Fabi, what's up? You should be doing this stuff in your sleep. And there's a gap in his play. And maybe that's the gap that keeps him from being able to overtake somebody like Magnus Carlsen.
It's, first of all, that's amazing that Fabi said that, because we just think of these guys as they've mastered and then remastered and then super grandmastered every stage of the game, right? But even for them, there are stages, they're human beings, there are things they like, biases they have, areas where they prefer to spend their time studying. And so I've never heard him say that. That's fascinating. But honestly, today you can see that Magnus, whatever you see, when Magnus in the endgame, he has this like, I'm going to find every best move, every bleeping time. And that's his attitude, right? Other players maybe just don't like it. They don't like the endgame. And it shows a little bit.
The money in chess.
I hear you guys, but this one.
That's where the money is.
This one was page 1 of the Dvoretsky endgame manual. This particular one, walking into this, by the way, the king has gone to the other side of the board, but it doesn't change anything because you maintain contact with that a pawn. And once again, once the white king starts sliding over, you do the same construction. You know, it doesn't matter if the king is on the 7th rank or the 5th rank. And I'm just so surprised that Fabi let slip this endgame. It's at their level, Danny. This doesn't happen.
At our
this
level.
doesn't happen.
At our level.
Well, Maurice is a grandmaster.
Come on,
We are
come
not.
on.
You will
No,
be.
I mean,
I'll never be.
No, it's not about being a grandmaster either. This endgame is what you just said. You have a young aspiring master, and you say, here's Dvorsky's endgame manual, you know, or here's 100 endgames you must know by De La Villa. Just go look at this, okay? Make sure you know this stuff. This stuff you have to know. And that Fabi actually let this land on the board, and then his opportunities where he could have played much simpler moves. It's shocking. It just is absolutely stunning. I understand he is under a lot of pressure. Yes, it's very late. Playing chess is much harder than talking about chess. Let's be clear there. So yes, let's not beat him up too much. But I tell you, tonight he's going to do plenty of self-flagellation himself when he goes back and he goes, "Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Why didn't I win this game?"
Well, Maurice, you made a quick comment earlier that I'm going to go back to moments before we might have the handshake, because you quickly said these players make their money in the end game, and there's actually a similar saying in golf where they say you score around the hole, you score when putting. And I was talking with Magnus about this recently. Anyone who follows Magnus knows that he's gotten really into golf, right? And we were talking about how golf is maybe of all the sports, has such a direct correlation to chess comparisons. The opening is like the drive, and everyone's obsessed with their opening. Everyone thinks that they're going to get better because they study openings and they just want to learn how to drive the ball farther. When in reality, everything that moves closer to the hole is actually more important. Then you have your irons approaching the game with a more accurate, cleaner shot. And then ultimately, you score by your ability to be accurate when it matters most. And this was a casual conversation with Magnus on the golf course, if anyone wants to know, but I actually thought it was like 100% accurate.
Cool. Yeah.
And it is, definitely. And by the way, Fabi's still trying to somehow figure out how to make something happen here. And why not? Because when was the last pawn move? Well, could we figure that out? A5 was move 45. Was that the last pawn move? Because whatever it was, it's going to be 50 moves later.
Yeah.
So we're going to still be here. I think it's past midnight already here, actually. Oh, it's 11:58.
I was going to say, don't say we're going to be here for 50 more moves, please. I mean, but
if he can just keep making moves, he's going to keep making moves. There's no question about that. Although it looks very close to that draw, but he's going to try something. It's never over until it's over in chess. That's just the facts. But yes, I tell my students, and I know a couple of students who are watching right now, and I've said it to them, and it's like, listen, it's the end game. It's the end game. You want to be great? It's the end game. You want to be a boss? No end game's better than your opponents. Watch what happens. They're going to blend like crazy. They're going to make so many mistakes, and you're just going to school them. It's the end game, end game, end game. And everybody loves the tactics. I know I didn't know that as a young player because I loved wild positions and sacrifices and all that. It's only much later in my career did I realize just how my end games weren't at the level they needed to be in order to excel at the highest levels. And now I try to pass that on to my students. It's about the end games. Yeah. And Fabi didn't show it today.
And that's also been one of the biggest defining aspects of Magnus's greatness, right? That we've seen in his career. How he changed the way end games were looked at. Positions that were agreed to be drawn, moves ago, years ago, he would just play them on and show how rich they were. And this, I'm talking when he went to world #1 back in 2010 and 11, and he just changed the landscape of the game. Mm-hmm. He pushed the boundaries of what can be played for. Squeezing water out of stone is one cliche that we use for Magnus all the time because of the greatness that he's shown in this part of the game.
Yep. No, you're 100% right. And it will forever be part of his legacy, regardless of those who think the GOAT debate, as we've said, you have many from different generations. My personal opinion is that he is, but it's right there along with Gary and all those, so many others. But again, I don't think there's any denying what you said earlier in the broadcast, Tanya, that when it comes to endgames, he changed not just the generation that he was in terms of saying, hey, like, there's a lot more chess here to be played. But I think he changed how fans were thinking about how to play those positions too. It was like, oh, like I can play like Magnus. I'm going to play this position. Just because it's equal doesn't mean it's a draw. When it's equal, whoever plays better wins.
Yes,
There's still a lot of chess here.
Yes, and I think in some ways he forced his own generation to get better at endgames to be able to compete against him. Because they realized earlier on that this guy in an equal position is going to try every single thing until there's a king and king left on the board. And he did that, and he proved that he has a point every time. Just pushing the boundaries of the sport itself.
That's what Fabi's trying to do right now. He's trying to out Magnus. Right? He's like, okay, it's a draw, I know, but I think you might make a mistake. And
I like it.
And it happened. It actually did happen. Magnus made a couple of mistakes. Probably had 2 wins. Now we've closed in on one of those, we know this one's a draw kind of position. But we've seen it happen before, and Magnus himself actually has done it to people where it's like, we know this is a what just happened? Like, you know, like that kind of thing where Magnus just turns the game around. So Fabi actually had a couple of chances to out Magnus, and he's trying for a 3rd time. Unfortunately, this was a little bit too technical. I'm not going to say it's over, but it's over.
By the way, that was a fun little trick Fabi
It was.
Little trap there that Fabi just set as Maurice commented. He was trying to Magnus. Magnus also, along with being very accurate and a great endgame player and all the things that he is, he also tends to set traps really well, and so you create opportunities for your opponent to go wrong. A lot of times they will. Fabi tried to do that. I'll just show real quick the trick. He put the rook on the 8th rank, hoping for a discovered check that might actually pick up the rook. If you're careless and give a check, things could have gone terribly wrong. But Magnus didn't. He quickly put the king off of the 8th rank, and we maintain ourselves in the Vancouver position. As Marie said, the rook is defending laterally. And
But now, is rook b6 the only move? Because every other rook square, you land up with that trap that you were just pointed out. Rook d6, rook e6, rook f6. Or not. No. I thought king is on 8-7. He's moved out of it.
Yeah. But that trap is still in the air if this rook touches too close to the king. So Magnus is being careful.
He has to be
He can do it. He can do it right now because also I noticed when it was king on e7, rook on a7, Magnus moved back with the king to h8.
Yeah.
So just making sure you sidestep any of the checks. Yeah, and I had a blind spot right now. I thought Magnus's king is on h8, but you'd still have the b6 square in that case.
Yep.
Yeah, it reminds me of queen endings when you don't want the king to be on the same rank, or you want it when you're the side with the queen, so the kings are on the same line so that you can block with your queen. Somebody, if they play check, you just block with your queen, and that pins the queen to the queen. So you like having the kings on the same rank. So in this position, this is what Fabi wants, except his rook is nowhere, like it can't play rook e8 at the moment to make it work because the move is going to be rook takes on a6. Now this one, there's a small trap involved as well.
Yes.
You want to play king h6 now? Ooh, look at that. That's a great pawn to win. Well, I'm going to hit you with a check.
Oh, you start with a7.
No, you start first with the push. We start with the push, and then now suddenly you go, oh, what happened here? Well, what happened was, you just lost the game, son. So Magnus is not taking.
No.
Magnus.
Although, funnily enough, you can actually take with the rook because you have time to get back to the lateral check, and the king still hasn't gotten there. So what's funny is Magnus is pausing a moment here for station identification on the Magnus Carlsen Endgame network.
I like that.
Yeah, the main point being rook takes a7 allows rook a6, and then you don't, just one tempo. Can I just play king b7? Just let me do it, please. But rook takes and then a6, then rook takes and a7, if we may show that line real fast. Rook takes and a7. If only you could play after rook a6.
You have to go rook a6.
If only you could play king b7.
One square too slow.
Just one square too slow. But now you can't play king to b7 because you start getting checked.
The king has been ridiculed its whole life. Too weak, too slow. That's what they told the king.
Heard that one before.
And he's taken it with it. I know that it's a draw, and it is definitely now past midnight.
But it's a good point. If the king was not too weak, too slow, if the king could move 2 squares, this is a winning endgame.
But either way, either the rook will come back laterally, everyone, and we're back to the same idea we've been showing all night, or you push a7, as Maurice pointed out, and the rook comes behind, and now your king no longer has that shield that you needed. You needed this square. You needed the pawn to be here, but it's not. And so my mouse is slipping a little bit, and the king has nowhere to hide from the onslaught of checks.
Yeah. And I think to your point, if after rook g6, that position that you had a7, yes, here, if a7, now if you go rook a6, you get that spot. Now rook a6 would be a big blunder because white is in time with king b7.
So now you come down. You could probably check laterally too, actually.
You have to. I think that's the only move.
No. Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. The pawn's on a7. I was thinking of the same idea. Yep. Rook g7, and the king has nowhere to hide. So this pawn on a7 is a problem whenever the king is trying to escape checks in these rook endings.
Could we complete this, please? Because some people might be wondering, if king to d6 here, we give another check, king e5. Can't we come closer to that king? I mean, to that rook? And
yes, and
yeah,
then
you can if you want to, but nothing's going to happen. you got 0. And now Fabi, head in hand. What he's doing right now is he's just getting over dejection.
Yeah.
He knows
he had it.
There's nothing here. He may not know he had it.
I think he does, Maurice.
I'd be curious to know if
I think he realizes it, that he messed up when he took that pawn because it was really close. These guys, they're just too strong to not know. But you're right. I mean, I think we're going to ask him at some point, did he feel it? Where did it miss? And we'll know the answer to it. But if I had to guess, I think he knows. All right, so he again lines up with the king.
Yeah.
Fabi's trying.
Another trap.
So if you go...
Is
there a right square, or do you have too many options still?
But it's a fun little trap, and again, instructive for the viewers, because Fabi knows that the moment you push this pawn, you might as well just extend your hand and offer the draw, because the king will officially have no more checks, whether they're coming horizontally or laterally. So this move keeps the hope alive. It keeps the dream alive that you might have a way to shield your king from checks. Even if it's still a draw, at least you're making Magnus work for it still.
He continues. He does it. Every time the rook and the king line up with this discovered check that you're talking about, Magnus sidesteps it on the other rank.
If the king runs over, I guess there are a couple options. You might actually just be able to bring the king over at this point and get to the other way you draw these rook endings when it's a corner pawn.
Yep.
Isn't it easiest to bring the rook to f6 and then just start checking again?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Good point.
We might see that, by the way, because king c7 is on the board. So Magnus, he reaches for the rook.
And indeed, he plays the line you suggested, pointing out that, once again, the king is too weak, too slow, can't quite get out of the way of checks in time. If you push a7, we get the same idea. By the way, again, a7, now the king is close enough to win. So you can't do that.
One thing I'd like to point out, given that we've exhausted everything about the chess board itself, is Magnus's attitude.
Yeah.
Okay? You don't see him leaning back. You don't see him bored. You don't see him thinking, why don't you just give me the draw already? Look at his body language. He's saying, I remain focused. I'm not, whatever I'm going to do, I'm going to just make sure that I don't slip here. Now, he did make mistakes earlier in the game, but even in this position, which we can see is dead drawn, and many of us would be like, yo, why don't you just give me the draw? What are you doing? Why are you still playing? Magnus is eyeballing everything. The closer he gets to the finish line, the more he knows it is just a draw. And now Fabi just played a move that's pointlessly a draw, just to be fancy.
We will see the handshake.
And there it is. And we get the handshake.
Here it is. Magnus Carlsen wins the Grand Slam Tour of 2025-2026 Freestyle Launch Event and $60,000 with it.
Incredible stuff. And Fabi made him sweat for this one. And he was so close. And I think, Maurice, you spoke about Magnus's focus in the very end. It's also because Magnus realized how close he came to actually messing it all up. And we see him on our screen. They're still analyzing this rook ending. And if Fabi didn't figure it out earlier, I think now he will definitely realize what a golden opportunity that was.
That's the worst feeling after the game when your opponent's like, yeah, you know, you could have done this. And somehow players relish that moment, right? To say, hey, you know, you could have done this. And you're, oh, what? Are you kidding? I could have done that move. I would have won. I'm curious to know if what Magnus knows about when he made a mistake in the rook and pawn ending. But yes, Fabi will absolutely be crushed by the fact that he could have just drawn that game. I mean, won that game.
And it was so close. From the very beginning, Fabi putting pressure on Magnus, finding those brilliant moves, Magnus creating his chances, getting that central break in. And just when we thought it was all done, Magnus with that uncharacteristic ending mistake, giving Fabi a golden opportunity. And then those last few moments, and finally we see Magnus with a smile. He's done it. He's won the Grand Slam challenge against the world number 2, but this one was so close.
And I'm going to say this. He's happy that he won, but he won't be happy with what he did in giving Fabi those chances. He won't be happy. He's a perfectionist. He's the greatest player of this generation, and whatever the arguments are of all time, for a reason. It's because he expects greatness of himself as routine. He expects it of himself. And for him to allow slips in a position that was simply drawn, he's going to always say, what did I do there? Because this is a big moment. This was $60,000 on the line. This is an important event. You want to win this event. You're against your greatest rival, or at least one of the top 3 greatest rivals. I would give maybe top 2 greatest rivals. I'll throw Hikaru Nakamura in there as the other one at the moment. And you gave him chances. You gave him chances to win. You would have had so much more work. Can you imagine if he had lost this game?
And the momentum, how that shifts, Maurice. You know, you allow your opponent to make a comeback. You've got to fight it out all over again. It's a reset with 2 rapid games. Would have been completely different. Somehow, Danny Ranch has disappeared from sitting next to me. He's on the stage, and I think we'll be hearing from the players really soon. And this is what shows, right, how much they love the game. They know they've got so much mutual respect for each other, Magnus and Fabi. Magnus has said it, Fabi the most formidable opponent, and right now they continue to look deep into all the algorithms and all the moves that we were discussing. Magnus finally getting the draw and winning.
I'll point out also, there's such great things about our game, and one is this professional respect, but also this idea of the post-mortem. What sports do we know that we can bring just quickly to mind where after the competitors have battled, punched at each other and tried to take each other down, that afterwards they actually discuss amicably, even helpfully, if you will, to what could have happened? What is another move I could have played here? What ideas? Maybe you should have tried this. What about this? What were you thinking here? In sports, usually it's like, I need to get this clown out my face. Maybe I'll give him a pound, be like, we good, whatever, next time. But then I got to go. We can analyze on our own with our own film crew, go review, whatever, but not actually have 2 competitors who will be competing. Let's be clear. This is just the beginning. We've got a lot more of this that's going to happen throughout the year, and maybe even a couple of 3-4 years to come, that these 2 are going to be at the top of the game, and they're helping each other with analysis? Like, what are you doing? Don't tell them anything.
The love for the game goes beyond everything else. And the search for the truth in these positions, Maurice.
And for each other. And for each other. It is about the truth, and it is still about, we are chess players. That's what we are. In this case, freestyle chess players. But whatever it is, that's what we are. And there's a bond, right? There is that kinship. And this kind of discussion is routine all around the world.
I would love to get the players' thoughts and hear what they're saying right now. I think we're trying to get that set up so everyone can hear the analysis that they're bringing on. And like you said, we've got the entire Freestyle Chess Grand Slam Tour for 2025 that's coming up. This is just the beginning. This is just setting the stage with the 2 best players in the world facing each other in this incredible format that sees their creativity, that sees the absolute rawness of bringing the skill from move number 1. We're just getting started. These 2 are going to be facing each other on this very scene, on this very board, 1 random position out of 960 over the course of the next year so many times.
That is the case. You said it is only the start. And here you see Magnus thinking through what could have happened, the dangers that had actually faced him, and how he could have likely lost this game, and he's just making some points there to Fabi. And as you said, it is just that. We will see more of this action. We will see more of the drama. We will see more of the heart defibrillators going, wait a second, what's going on? We need some help. These guys are in trouble. Something dangerous is going to happen, something wild. Oh, we thought it was a draw. Now it's a win. You know, all that is still the case ahead. And what I also love is, you know, we talked about the fact that this is freestyle chess, right? This is freestyle chess. But it came down to a Dvoretsky Endgame manual or De La Villa Endgame book. Because it's chess, people. If you thought freestyle chess was odd, it's weird, it sucks, it's too difficult. No, it's actually chess. And the hardest part of the game turned out to be the endgame, a basic endgame that we would see in our standard 5-18 position.
You know, Magnus was in Kolkata right before this tournament where he won this fascinating, crazy, absolutely nuts game against Arjun Argesi. And he said that was his favorite game because he beat Arjun in a position, in a game that's Arjun's strength. So he sort of out-Arjuned Arjun in that game. And I feel this was Fabi's moment to do exactly that. Imagine making a comeback. You know, it's your last game, it's your last opportunity, your last shot, and you've done everything right. You get to that moment where in an endgame, you can outclass Magnus Carlsen. That's not an opportunity you get every day of your career. You barely ever get it. And for Fabi, I think that's going to be a tough pill to swallow. That he wasn't able to take this down to the rapid when he was right there in front of him. And Magnus once again does Magnus things and survives it. And for Fabi, it's a tough moment.
And on more than one occasion for Fabi, right? There was the moment when he could have played C takes B6 in the game. Instead, he allowed C take and that crazy bishop E5 idea, like E5 and bishop takes.
Oh my
so that was one moment. But then when he decided, okay, look, I'm going to go into that rook takes on doubling rooks. And we saw that position when he went into an endgame and missed the E4 move with the bishop versus the knight and the two rooks on the board because he may have missed castles. We still don't know if he did, but he might have missed the castles move. And then he forced action with F5 in a moment when he could have just played rook A6. Another chance to get a win against. And then they even went into a drawn endgame and he had a couple more chances. That's 5 I just named right from memory that he could have really put it to Magnus. He missed all of them. He literally missed all of them. And Magnus gave him a chance after another chance after another chance. It shows that nobody's perfect, even somebody like Magnus. And it still, in the end, ended up in a draw. King versus king, by the way.
I mean, the match didn't go down to the wire, but this game definitely did. And I think it's the last one, you know, out of everything that you just said. That's the most painful for Fabi. That rook pawn endgame that perhaps should have ended a year ago in a draw. You pointed out so many ways that it could have been done easier. And it felt like Magnus, you know, he was taking these decisions that made the margin to that draw narrower and narrower. That path got more narrow with every single move. He had to be accurate. And then we just saw the bar shoot up because it's hard to be accurate in every single move of chess. And then Fabi, he took this one decision of grabbing that pawn a bit too early, just allowing those checks. And Magnus got the perfect setup and never let go. And he was totally locked in after that because he felt it, that he had let it slip. But he was saying, not again, not in this game, not today.
Not at all. And by the way, for those who are chess fans, maybe brand new chess fans, you know, you're looking at these players and they are talking about the moves in the game, but there's no moves being played on the board. They're not setting it up to recreate. They see the entire game is clear as a picture in their minds. This could have gone that way, this could have gone that way. On any number move, they could jump to move number 10. They could jump to move number 25. They could jump to anywhere in this game in their minds. And so that's what they're doing. They're having this discussion right now. That's been an extended discussion. Nobody dare interrupt them. By the way, you notice nobody's doing anything to block them in any way or say, "Hey guys, you know, we need to keep it moving." They're just letting them stay there, intrigued by the position, deep in thought, wondering about all the possibilities. By the way, this is an opening or a position they may not see for another 959 tries. So how much they're going deep into opening analysis, I doubt. But the fascination with the position, this could go on literally for hours like this, literally. if they just kept going and kept analyzing, asking all the questions, what about this? What do you think if I tried this? They're almost playing out another 15, 20 games right now as they analyze just in their minds.
And I think a lot of that is around the end game, but also this really fascinating middle game battle that we have between these two, right? Allowing e5, having this structure, this opening position that they had. They're trying to work out the best moves because, Maurice, so far, you know, we've got this incredible machine that decides the position. It mixes the balls up, and you've got Holly picking up a random number, and that's the position that they start with. 960, 518 has been removed from that. That's our standard position. That doesn't exist. So that comes down to 959 positions. And between these two players, that's the world number 1 and world number 2, so far, they've only played 10 positions out of the 959.
Incredible. Incredible. By the way, usually I don't remember any of these positions. It's like, it's over, it's done. But I'm going to remember 180. I'm going to remember 180, this one. I'm going to file away my memory banks because it was quite memorable.
Yes.
It was the kind of position with all that richness and drama, seeing him play c4, Fabi play c4, d4, c5 in the opening, the possible breaks that could have happened, the action with the bishop takes d3 in the opening, all kinds of intrigue. As we see Danny there, a man on a mission. Is he actually going to interrupt the players so that you can get a word from them? I think that they want to hear from them less than from us.
Well, let's do it. Danny's ready. The players will be ready soon. And I think we're going live to our arena with Danny.
And that is, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, but that's a wrap. Let's hear it for the players, everybody. Let's hear it for the start. For the start of the 2025-2026 Freestyle Chess Grand Slam Tour. I don't think it could have started any better than what we've had here in Singapore. Guys, this was awesome analysis. I know you probably don't want to talk too much more about the game because you've already had it. So I'm going to ask you just a couple questions, and then we're going to do the closing ceremony. Fabi, I know this match didn't go the way you had hoped, but your thoughts reflecting on how this game went, the pressure you were able to put on Magnus, and your takeaways here from the match that went Magnus's way.
I mean, I don't know exactly like what the extent of my advantage was. I did feel like I was very close to winning at various moments. Yesterday was a poor game from my side, so of course approaching a must-win, it wasn't like I knew that my chances were probably not super high, but definitely better than in classical chess. And I kind of liked the starting position. I liked what we got. It was extremely imbalanced. Yeah, I thought I was close to win after f4. Like I felt like things might really turn in my favor. Okay, overall, of course, both games were disappointing in different ways. But I mean, at least today, I felt like a normal game. Yesterday was just basically didn't show up and just wasn't really there and played pretty poorly. But I think Magnus played well and deservedly won.
I know it's tough. You played incredibly well too, though, and you're hard on yourself from yesterday. But I want to ask you a bigger picture question about the start of the Freestyle Chess Grand Slam Tour and reflecting back on Weisenhaus. You've now played this guy in some of the most epic classical chess 518 matches, regular chess. You've played him in some pretty epic matches at Freestyle. What do you prefer going forward at giving your best chances to take Magnus down here?
Well, yeah, it's of course these two Freestyle matches both didn't go my way, for different reasons. I mean, you know, it's of course it's never easy. But it is disappointing to lose in the classical portion and not to get to a rapid tiebreak at the very least. And I think that would have been really fun, but yeah, it wasn't to be this time. But I'm really looking forward to the events next year, and hopefully we'll play more matches and I'll be able to do better.
All right. Well, let's hear it for Fabiano Caruana. Congratulations again. You played great. I'm going to go over to you, Magnus, before we do the closing ceremony here. How How nervous were you feeling at different points in this game? How big of an advantage did you think Fabi had as you were defending that rook ending down to the wire?
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure ever. I was just doing the best I could to hold on, and I feel like usually in these situations with little time we end up making some mistakes, but I felt overall I did a really good job defending today, and you know, he put immense amounts of pressure. I was forced to do everything I could just to stay alive, and like sometimes like that's all you have to do, just stay alive long enough, and eventually you might save the game. And of course it's also easier to do that when you know that you win the match with a draw. But yeah, it was a very, very tough game today, and it was a huge relief to save it at the end.
I'm not going to ask you whether you prefer playing this guy in classical or freestyle, because I think I know how you feel about the future of freestyle, but I will ask you this. You've said that this guy was your toughest opponent throughout your career over the last 2 decades in your generation, that he was the toughest fight you ever had. You've now had 2 epic matches against him in freestyle. Is he so far the toughest opponent you've had in freestyle as well?
Yeah, I mean, specifically in classical, like I've lost a couple of matches in rapid to Wesley and Jan. I beat Hikari once as well, so it remains to be seen. But so far, I feel like Fabi understands the positions really well, and you know, sets a lot of challenges. So I feel like so far he's showing a very good level.
Last question before we walk over here and you get the big check. We're going to do the closing ceremony. I think you both have a couple of big checks. So as you think about this week in Singapore and you get ready for what's ahead, how excited are you about what has come together here? And is this only the beginning and the vision that you had when you and Jan-Henrik came together for this?
No, I really hope this is only the beginning. I think these games have showcased what an exciting format that this can be. So I think we're only at the beginning, and I'm very, very excited for the future.
Awesome. Let's hear it for Magnus Carlsen again, the winner of your 2025 Freestyle Chess Grand Slam Tour launch event. We're going to head on over here, guys. Please come with me. Jan-Henrik Butner, please join me as well. And we're going to hand out some big checks real quick. And Jan-Henrik, if you would like to say a couple words, but first let's have our runner-up, Fabiano Caruana, come up here and receive your prize from Jan-Henrik. Jan-Henrik, what's it been like for you to have this guy in your event, and your thoughts real quick on spending the week with Fabiano in Singapore?
Well, Fabiano is such an incredible, humble person, and really has become a very good friend. And I really would have hoped for him to use his chances. He had, I saw it, I didn't know why, but he has suddenly had, a huge chance, winning, and then again not, and then a huge chance again, and then not, and then it was like 3 times that the eval bar was like going crazy up. I was like, wow, okay, and then it was down. So did you feel this also? Did you know that you kind of had this chance and then not, or not?
Yeah, well, I guess that means that we were blundering in the rook endgame. That's pretty much the only explanation, which I wasn't sure. I thought it's like very close, but didn't really have a clear idea of like how I'm making progress. I mean, taking the pawn was probably a very bad decision. I mean, I kind of got down to a few seconds and panicked. But I don't think it was ever easy. And both Magnus and I, after the game, we weren't exactly sure, like, how white is supposed to play this position, this rook endgame. But yeah, it doesn't feel great to know that I had some chances and missed them. I don't think that it was ever super easy to find in time pressure, at least.
Perfect. So thank you very much for being here, for having done this, and I think that you don't regret it that you came here all the way. It's really a long way from your home, even more than from our home, basically, coming here to Singapore. You're heading back like in a few hours. You're gonna party all night. You're not gonna sleep. I heard from Eric, right?
I don't know. I have a 6:30 flight, just so I can get back in time to play another tournament. But I might not sleep, I guess, since I don't really feel like sleeping.
Exactly. So he doesn't feel like sleeping, and it's like in 5-6 hours the flight is going. So again, thank you very much. And Holly, could you give the check, please? So
Go ahead, guys. Fabiano Caruana, again, one more time. $40,000 and chess in the pool. I don't think it gets any better than that. Thanks, Fabi. All right, Magnus, if you could come up here again. Jan Henrik, I'll give it to you to say a couple words about kicking off the 2025 Freestyle Chess Grand Slam Tour with Magnus Carlsen here.
All right, Magnus, you did it again. Thank you very much. Congratulations, it was fantastic, and really put on a great show. And I'm asking you just also the question: did you realize when you like had we as spectators we basically saw it like it were going up? Did you feel after the fact that there was something wrong or not?
Well, I suspected that I may have made a mistake in the rook endgame, but I wasn't quite sure, and it seems that he wasn't either. So all I can say is that it's not easy for us, not easy for anybody. So please forgive us for the mistakes we make.
Well, this was making us for us exciting. It was like, okay, it was going. All of a sudden, when the eval bar shoots up, it was like, okay, everybody wakes up, something is going on.
Yeah, I mean, these are the kinds of positions where like either it's a win or it's a draw. So the shifts with seemingly innocuous moves is, of course, very dramatic.
Great 25 coming at you from Weisenhouse. And until then, enjoy your night and be safe, everybody.
It is a dream to play this tournament.
This was absolutely amazing.
The organization was really great.